Chapter 803. Ha! A bunch of ignorant humans. How dare you barge in here? You're destined to die here. At this moment, a zombie walked out from the first step and spoke. Go to hell. Yihao didn't give the zombie any face when he saw it. He took out a handful of spirit coins and threw it over. Rumble. Suddenly, a loud sound rang out. As for the zombies on the first step, almost all of them were killed in an instant. There was still a certain distance between the first step and the second step. However, the power of the spirit coins directly affected the second step. Countless zombies on the second step were killed in an instant. The remaining ones were also sent flying. In an instant, dozens of zombies were killed or injured. The heavenly spirit also pounced overexcitedly. The loud sound naturally alarmed the zombies on the other steps. There was at least one Emperor-level zombie with spiritual intelligence on almost every step. Under the orders of these zombies with spiritual intelligence, all the zombies swarmed toward Yihao like a tide. All of you retreat first. There were at least a few hundred zombies swarming down. This was also the reason why the zombies on the higher steps didn't move. If they were surrounded by so many zombies, they would really be in trouble. Even immortals wouldn't be able to save them. When everyone heard Yihao's order, they immediately retreated. The momentum in front of them was simply too shocking. They also knew that if they rashly rushed up at this moment, they would be courting death. Moreover, they would also cause trouble for Yihao. Thus, the crowd began to rapidly move back. This time, Yihao took out more spirit coins and threw them all on the ground. Then he also retreated. The zombies naturally chased after him and pounced toward Yihao and the others. However, Yihao suddenly stopped. When he saw that the zombies had already reached the pile of spirit coins he threw, he immediately smiled. Explode. Rumble. 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 As soon as Yihao finished speaking, the pile of spirit coins suddenly exploded like a time bomb. As for the hundreds of zombies that had rushed over, they were all within the range of the explosion. Therefore, in an instant, the tiger-like zombies were all blown to smithereens. As for the heavenly spirit, it once again charged forward excitedly. At this moment, everyone stopped and looked at the scene before them in shock. They knew that Yihao's use of spirit coins was terrifyingly powerful. However, at this moment, when they saw hundreds of ferocious zombies being instantly destroyed by spirit coins, they could not help but be shocked again. You guys wait here and help me clean up the battlefield later. Yihao took out another handful of spirit coins and climbed up the stairway to heaven. When Yihao reached the 6th floor, he saw another large group of zombies. Without another word, Yihao threw down the spirit coins and ran. As Yihao ran, he threw a large pile of spirit coins on the ground. Because of the previous case, Yihao had to be on guard against zombies on the 7th floor and above chasing after him. There was an explosion, and the zombies on the 6th floor were all cleaned up. As expected, Yihao guessed correctly. After the explosion, the zombies on the 7th to 8th floors immediately chased after him. Fortunately, although those zombies had developed spiritual intelligence, their intelligence was not too high. Also, the distance between the stairs was relatively far. Otherwise, if all the zombies on the stairway to heaven attacked him, even if he used spirit coins, he probably would not be able to blow up all of them. As for the zombies that chased after Yihao, there was no need to think too much about the outcome. They were all killed and injured by the spirit coins that Yihao left on the ground. When Yihao saw that the zombies were not dead, he immediately added a few spirit coins. The heavenly spirit was also very cooperative with Yihao. As soon as the ghost spirit fire appeared, the heavenly spirit would immediately swallow it. After Yihao finished dealing with the zombies, he recovered his physical strength. This was because it seemed very easy to control the explosion of these spirit coins. In fact, it consumed a lot of his mental strength, physical strength, and martial arts power. Even though Yihao's cultivation was comparable to the peak of the Demon Emperor at this moment, he could not bear a series of explosions at this moment. However, Yihao only recovered for a moment. Then he took out a handful of spirit coins and rushed up again. Yihao looked at the endless stairway to heaven and suddenly felt great pressure. Yihao roughly estimated that there were at least 8,000 or 9,000 steps on the stairway to heaven, if not 10,000. This was because the stairway to heaven was densely packed with zombies as far as the eye could see. Moreover, the higher they went, the darker the sky became, so they really could not see the end of the stairway to heaven. Fortunately, Yihao had enough spirit coins in his space ring. Otherwise, he would have to shrink back at the sight of the stairway to heaven. Everyone followed Yihao and kept cleaning the battlefield. They searched the ground and the zombies for the scattered space rings. At this moment, everyone was almost numb from the shock at the beginning. They could no longer think of any adjectives to describe Yihao. There was only one word that they could think of to describe him. Changed. Changed. It should be known that the zombies without spiritual intelligence were generally at the level of the Demon Emperor. The ones with spiritual intelligence were at the level of the Demon Master. If the crowd were to face these zombies, they would definitely feel their scalps go numb. However, Yihao was doing well. Every time he attacked, he could kill dozens of zombies or even hundreds of zombies. In the eyes of the crowd, these zombies, who were supposed to be so powerful, were completely reduced to ants in the hands of Yihao. They did not even have the chance to attack. The killing lasted for a whole day. Yihao did not know how many zombies he had killed. He did not stop to rest until his physical strength was completely exhausted. In this day, Yihao had climbed nearly 100 steps. When night fell, the baleful Inshi in the Array Pill Sacred Sect, which was already dark to begin with, became even denser. To Yihao's surprise, the zombies, who were getting along peacefully during the day, started to kill each other. Those zombies with spiritual intelligence did not stop them. Sometimes they even killed the zombies themselves. I was wondering why there were corpses on these steps. I see. Seeing the scene in front of him, Yihao was suddenly enlightened. This was because Yihao realized that although there were many zombies standing on each step, the number of zombies was very small compared to the total number of steps. Moreover, the steps were very empty. At first, Yihao did not pay much attention to the corpses on the ground. Chapter 804. The zombies killing each other was a good thing for Yihao. It would reduce his workload. Although the zombies killed each other very fiercely, it was not so easy to defeat each other. Yihao watched for a long time before a zombie died. However, before the victorious zombie could devour the ghost spirit fire of the defeated zombie, the heavenly Een spirit would beat it to it. Moreover, the heavenly Een spirit would leave immediately after snatching the ghost spirit fire. Therefore, the zombies could not do anything to the heavenly Een spirit. Yihao and the others gathered at the bottom of the stairway. At this moment, Yihao was recovering his strength. The others were not idle either. They all began to refine pills to increase their strength. On the second day, the zombies seemed to be tired after a day of killing. All the zombies stopped attacking. When Yihao saw that the zombies had stopped attacking each other, he knew that it was time for him to make a move. After a night of recovery, Yihao's physical and mental strength had also recovered to their peak state. Yihao immediately took a handful of spirit coins and continued to climb the stairs to attack the zombies. The situation was no different from yesterday. Yihao experienced another day of killing and recovered his strength. The next day, he continued to kill the zombies. After killing for 7 to 8 days, Yihao really did not know how many zombies he had killed, not to mention the others who were numb. Even he himself had become a little numb after continuously killing the zombies. "Master, look, it seems to be the end." Everyone followed Yihao. The people who were cleaning up the battlefield suddenly shouted excitedly. Hearing this person's words, everyone immediately raised their heads excitedly and looked up. Yihao did the same. He raised his head and saw that less than 200 steps up, there was already a vague image of a palace. It seems that it will take another 2 days to climb all the steps of the stairway. Yihao looked at the remaining steps and roughly estimated in his heart. Although the zombies at the back were indeed much stronger than the zombies at the front, in the face of the power of the spirit coins, they would still die. After Yihao recovered his strength, he began to kill the zombies again. He could not help but look forward to killing the boss quickly. It was not because of anything else. It was because he and the others had been delayed in the Elixir Divine sect for a long time. The journey to the Tianyuan Academy was still very far. Yihao was afraid that if they continued to delay, they might not have enough time to get to the Tianyuan Academy. Phew! I'm finally going to kill them all. Yihao looked in front. He could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Yihao looked at the spirit coins in his hand and decided to eliminate the zombies on the first 2 steps in one go. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that there weren't many zombies left. After all, they had to face so many zombies on a daily basis. Even they were feeling enormous pressure. Although they did not need to kill the zombies, they were tired just watching Yihao kill the zombies. Human, what is in your hand? How did you fight your way here? Suddenly, one of the zombies on the last 2 steps stared at Yihao with a look of terror on its face. Try it yourself, and you will know. After Yihao finished speaking, he did not wait for the zombie to react. He threw all the spirit coins in his hand. No! The zombie let out an unwilling roar. However, it was still destroyed by the spirit coins. When the smoke and dust dispersed, Yihao looked at the steps. There were no more zombies. Yihao looked down and could not help but sigh in his heart. One had to know that it took him almost 10 days to climb up these 1,000 steps. The number of zombies he killed was countless. At the same time, he could not help but secretly rejoice that he had discovered the great power of the spirit coins. Otherwise, if he did not have the power of the spirit coins, not to mention the danger, he estimated that it would take him more than a year to lead the group to kill his way here. However, he could use the spirit coins and kill his way here in less than 10 days. He could not help but feel a little satisfied. After climbing up the last step, Yihao looked at the main hall with the closed door in front of him. He could not help but feel a little nervous. This was because this was the last territory of the Formation Elixir sect. Therefore, the boss of the Formation Elixir sect should be in this main hall. However, since it was the boss, its strength should not be underestimated. Therefore, Yihao could not determine whether there was any danger in this main hall. After all, the door was now tightly closed. He could not see what was in the main hall at all. Moreover, he was not sure if it would be useful to use the powerful spirit coins to face the boss. If the boss in the main hall was too powerful and the spirit coins could not do anything to it, it would be a tragedy. Since we are already here, how can we not try and give up halfway? Yihao made up his mind. Yihao threw a spirit coin directly at the door of the main hall in an attempt to blow the door open. However, to Yihao's surprise, although the spirit coin exploded when it hit the door of the palace did not move at all. Hiss! When the crowd saw this scene, they could not help but gasp. After all, they had seen the power of the spirit coins. The spirit coins had the power to kill the demon's supremacy in an instant. However, at this moment, the spirit coins could not blow up the door. This shocked the crowd and made them feel that it was a little unrealistic. One should know that this was just the door of the main hall, and its defense was already so powerful. Who knew how powerful the zombies in the main hall were? It seems that we can only obediently open the door. After Yihao finished speaking, he went forward and began to push the door of the palace. Lord, be careful. When the crowd saw Yihao going forward alone to push the door of the main hall, they all shouted nervously. Creak! Yihao placed his hands on the door of the main hall and then pushed hard. The door of the main hall began to open slowly. Yihao retreated to the side and did not rush in. Instead, he looked into the depths of the main hall with vigilance. The crowd also looked straight into the main hall with vigilance. However, when they looked in from the outside, they could only see that the main hall was pitch black. Yihao stood outside the main hall and waited for a long time. However, there was no movement in the main hall at all. It was as if there was no one in the main hall. Should I go in or not? Looking at the open door of the main hall in front of him, Yihao hesitated again. Chapter 805. Yihao held a handful of spirit coins in his hand and stepped into the main hall. The people behind him hurriedly followed. Yihao entered the main hall and was instantly stunned. He thought that entering the main hall would be dangerous. However, the entire main hall was empty. There was not a single person in sight. Moreover, there were books and weapons everywhere. After entering the main hall, it was not as cold and gloomy as the outside. Instead, the luminous pearls above the main hall illuminated the main hall very brightly. Something's not right. Logically speaking, shouldn't there be a boss here? Yihao suddenly focused and looked around vigilantly. My lord, there seems to be a coffin over there. A demon venerable suddenly pointed to a place behind the main hall that was blocked by a pile of spirit coins. Yi Hao immediately looked over and saw a pile of spirit coins there. Vaguely, he could see something that looked like a coffin. Yi Hao immediately led everyone over. Behind the spirit coins, there was not just a pile of spirit coins. Instead, the spirit coins formed a large circle. And in the middle of the circle, there was a transparent coffin. This is actually made of supreme-grade spirit stones. This is too extravagant. A demon venerable looked at the coffin in front of him and could not help but exclaim in surprise. What supreme-grade spirit stones? Hearing the demon venerable's words, everyone came forward and carefully observed. Their faces were all filled with shock. One had to know that although spirit stones were common in the ancient demon realm, almost all of them were made of low-grade spirit coins. Even in the Tianyuan kingdom, the best spirit coins were only made of mid-grade spirit stones. Only a few people would use high-grade spirit coins. This was because the higher the quality of spirit coins, the fewer the quantity and the higher the value. Even in the entire Tianyuan kingdom, there were not many high-grade spirit coins. Even if there were, they would not take them out. As for supreme-grade spirit coins, it was needless to say. There were very few supreme-grade spirit coins in the Tianyuan kingdom. This was because according to the exchange rate of spirit coins, one supreme-grade spirit coin could be exchanged for 100 high-grade spirit coins. And 100 high-grade spirit coins could be exchanged for 10,000 mid-grade spirit coins. 10,000 middle-grade spirit coins could be exchanged for 1 million low-grade spirit coins. In other words, one supreme spirit coin could be exchanged for 1 million low-grade spirit coins. Thus, the exchange rate was extremely terrifying. Moreover, supreme-grade spirit coins were very valuable. Even if there were 1 million low-grade spirit coins, no one would be willing to exchange them. Therefore, even the royal family of the Tianyuan kingdom might not be able to afford the supreme spirit coins. Even if they could, it would be a pitiful amount. Yet, there was a coffin made of a top-grade spirit stone here. One could imagine how extravagant it was. If you were to take this coffin out, it would definitely cause the entire ancient demon realm to go crazy. Countless experts would come out to snatch it. It would definitely set off a bloody storm. This was because if this coffin was cut, it would cost at least hundreds of thousands of top-grade spirit coins. What a terrifying number. Just this coffin alone was enough to buy dozens of Tianyuan kingdoms. Yi Hao couldn't help but sigh. This array Pill divine sect was indeed the number one sect from tens of thousands of years ago. Just the value of a coffin was already so shocking. Yi Hao looked at the spirit coins surrounding the coffin. The worst spirit coins were middle-grade spirit coins. Most of them were high-grade spirit coins, and a small portion were supreme-grade spirit coins. Low-grade spirit coins couldn't be found here at all. The number of spirit coins here was at least a few million. With these spirit coins, Yi Hao knew that these 10 days of tiring fighting were worth it. Of course, compared to the coffin made of a supreme-grade spirit stone, these millions of spirit coins were nothing. Yi Hao didn't stand on ceremony. He waved his sleeves, and with a thought, he kept the spirit coins into the system space. These spirit coins were definitely important resources for the development of his strength in the future. My lord, there's someone in the coffin. At first, no one noticed it. The moment Yi Hao moved the spirit coins away, the coffin was revealed. Everyone looked at the spirit stone coffin in front of them and exclaimed. Yi Hao immediately looked at the coffin and saw a person lying in it. The person was dressed in a long white dress. Although he couldn't see her face, Yi Hao was stunned when he saw her delicate side profile. This was because Yi Hao believed that he had seen countless women. But the woman in the coffin, just from the side of her face, he could tell that she had an otherworldly charm. She had a fresh and refined beauty. It was as if a fairy had fallen asleep, lying quietly in the spirit stone coffin. However, Yi Hao quickly recovered and frowned. He immediately looked at the crowd and found that they were all infatuated. They were all in a daze, and some of them were even drooling. Oh no, there's something strange about this woman. Yi Hao thought to himself when he saw the crowd's reaction. This was because the outside of the array Pill divine sect was full of danger. It was impossible for ordinary people to kill their way in. It should be said that the final hall should be the most dangerous place. However, other than the treasures, there was no dangerous ore at all. Furthermore, there was such a precious top-grade spirit stone coffin in the hall. However, the person lying in the coffin was a beauty. This was strange in itself. Judging from the crowd's reaction, they were obviously bewitched by the woman in the coffin. The Array Pill Divine sect had been destroyed for tens of thousands of years. This meant that the woman in the coffin and the coffin had existed for tens of thousands of years. This meant that the woman in the coffin had also been dead for tens of thousands of years. A group of demon supremacies and demon emperors were actually bewitched by a dead woman. It seemed unrealistic. However, this was something that had truly happened. That was because just now, Yihao had a feeling that the beauty in the coffin belonged to him, a feeling that he was willing to go through fire and water for the sake of this beauty. This feeling was not something that Yihao had. It was a feeling that was inexplicably born from his consciousness. But fortunately, he suddenly realized it. This was because the women he had seen were all 1 in a billion. However, none of them made him feel this way. Although the beauty in the coffin was very beautiful, she was at most on par with his woman. They each had their own style. However, he had only taken a few glances at her, and he felt that way. This was obviously strange. Yihao looked at the crowd and immediately gathered his strength. He shouted, "Wake up!" Yihao's voice echoed in the hall. Chapter 806. Everyone's eyes were still fixed on the coffin. Yihao looked at the coffin with a serious expression. However, Yihao did not dare to look at the beauty in the coffin. I wonder if I can keep the coffin in the system space. Yihao suddenly thought of this and immediately kept the coffin in the system space. Oh, it's really possible. Yihao did not expect that he would really be able to keep the coffin in the system space. It looks like that person is really dead. Yihao knew that the system space could not allow anyone to live. However, what Yihao did not know was that in the system space, the beauty in the coffin suddenly opened her eyes and then closed them again. If Yihao saw this, his jaw would have dropped. Unfortunately, he did not see it. The moment the coffin appeared, in a corner of the system space, a green egg moved for no reason and then rolled to the side of the coffin. If one looked closely, one could see that there was a trace of spiritual energy on the coffin that was flowing into the green egg. After Yihao put away the coffin, the crowd that was still in a daze suddenly woke up one by one. Moreover, all of them were sweating profusely and panting heavily. What happened just now? Why did I feel like I could not control myself? Just now, I felt as if I was completely imprisoned in my own body. This feeling is simply too unbearable. Why did it turn out like this? Everyone woke up and said with a face full of fear, why did the coffin disappear? Everyone then realized that the coffin in front of them had disappeared. I have kept the coffin. The reason why you were acting strangely just now was because of the person inside the coffin. Yihao heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that everyone had recovered. Then he explained, "My lord, look, there's a hole here." Everyone understood after hearing Yihao's explanation. Suddenly, someone saw that there was a fist-sized hole where the coffin used to be. Yihao and the others immediately gathered around. Strange, why does it look so similar? It's the core of an array. Although Yihao's attainments in array formations were still at the level of the 10,000 countries continent. However, he was still able to see the general structure of the formation. He couldn't understand why a coffin was placed at the heart of the formation. It could be said that the coffin was made of spirit stones, which served as the energy source for the formation. However, a coffin made of top-grade spirit stones was too extravagant. Most importantly, there was someone inside the coffin. Furthermore, the person in the coffin was clearly no ordinary person. Otherwise, the demon sovereigns and their disciples would not have suddenly become like that. Yihao looked around and then said to everyone in a deep voice, "All of you, back off." When everyone heard Yihao's words, they immediately retreated and looked at Yihao in confusion. Seeing that the crowd had retreated, he had a serious expression on his face. A few spirit stones suddenly appeared in his hand. Then, Yihao threw a punch at the hole. The size of the hole was exactly the size of fist. Yihao had used all his strength, but the ground was not damaged at all. Only a cracking sound was heard. Yihao also felt that his hand seemed to have hit some kind of mechanism. Yihao immediately retreated. Cha-cha-cha-cha. Rumble. Suddenly, there was a deafening sound of the mechanism rubbing against each other. Then the ground shook. Everyone immediately retreated to the side and looked at the ground warily. A hole that was 4 to 5 people wide appeared in the ground where Yihao had hit. Ha ha ha! Did my people wake me up? Suddenly, a strange, bone-chilling laughter came from the hole. Hearing that voice, the crowd felt a chill run down their spines. This cultivation is at least at the Demon Emperor level. Yihao had a serious expression on his face. Since he liked to hide underground, then don't ever come out. Yihao made up his mind. He immediately walked to the side of the hole and threw down a handful of spirit coins. However, Yihao also knew that if the zombie below was really at the Demon Emperor level, it would be impossible to kill it so easily. Therefore, Yihao threw the spirit coins 5 or 6 times in a row. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the hole, the sound of explosions came one after another. Everyone felt that it was deafening and covered their ears one by one. Moreover, because of the explosion of the spirit coins, the ground was trembling nonstop. This also made one sigh at the hardness of the ground. It was indeed very strong. If this was an ordinary ground, it would have collapsed long ago. I wonder if it's dead or not. After throwing the spirit coins 6 times in a row, Yihao stopped. Because if it was a Demon Emperor level zombie, he only needed to bomb it once, and it would be enough. It was because Yihao felt that the zombie below was definitely not ordinary that he bombed it 6 times. You are not from the array Pill Divine sect. Who are you? Why are you here? Suddenly, a miserable and horrifying cry came from the hole. However, the voice was filled with disbelief. Hearing this voice, Yihao could not help but frown. He did not expect that the zombie in the hole would be so strong. He had exploded 6 times, but he was still alive. Everyone's faces were also filled with shock. They all knew the power of the spirit coins. It was hard for them to think of any existence that could survive the attack of the spirit coins. The zombie below is at least at the Demon Emperor level. The Demon Emperors immediately confirmed in their hearts. At the same time, a worried expression appeared on their faces. Yihao had long guessed that the existence below would be at the Demon Emperor level. If Yihao guessed correctly, the person below was probably the boss that he killed. Even zombies outside could reach the level of demon supremacy. How could the boss inside this cave be weak? Thinking of this, Yihao immediately took out the spirit coins and threw them into the hole again. Rumble, who the hell are you? I'm going to kill you. The spirit coins exploded and the angry roar came from the hole again. Let's see how long you can hold on. Hearing the angry roar coming from the hole, Yihao took out another handful of spirit coins and threw them down. Rumble, despicable ant, if you have the ability, fight with me. The angry roar came from the hole again. You are a Demon Emperor. Unless my brain is damaged, I will fight with you. Yihao ignored it and continued to throw spirit coins. After all, that was a Demon Emperor level expert. If he wanted to kill everyone present, it would be a piece of cake. Therefore, he felt that he could not let the people in the hole out. Chapter 807. Rumble. Master, be careful. Yihao once again threw spirit coins into the hole. This time, after the spirit coins exploded, the ground suddenly caved in. When everyone saw this, they immediately cried out. Crap! Yihao immediately retreated. He had never imagined that the ground would collapse at this time. Bang! Crash! Just as Yihao retreated, a figure jumped out from the hole in the ground. The stones that were sent flying fell to the ground, giving off a crisp sound. The entire hall instantly became quiet. It was so quiet that it was a bit scary. A middle-aged man wearing a yellow robe with dragons and phoenixes embroidered on it had appeared. It should have been a mighty and domineering robe, but now it was in tatters. The robe was covered in dust. As for the middle-aged man, his skin was shriveled and ashen. His hair was disheveled, and he looked even more horrifying. Who did this? I, the sect master, am going to tear him to pieces. The middle-aged zombie roared furiously as he stroked his messy hair. The middle-aged zombie's body emitted ice-cold, killing intent. At the same time, his aura was oppressive. "Damn it! How did you get in here? Who ruined my grand plan?" roared the middle-aged zombie. That was because he sensed that all the zombies in the Formation Pill Divine Sect had died. "I'll tear you to pieces and refine you into my slaves. You'll never be able to reincarnate." The middle-aged zombie's fury could be felt from his tone. After roaring, the middle-aged zombie directly attacked everyone. "Run!" When Yihao saw the middle-aged zombie charging over, he knew that even if everyone joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for the middle-aged zombie. If they stayed behind to fight the middle-aged zombie, they would truly be throwing their lives away. After Yihao threw out several spirit coins, he immediately fled out of the hall. When everyone heard Yihao's order, they all began to flee. "So it's you." The middle-aged zombie was completely unaffected by the spirit coin's explosion. Looking at Yihao's back, his eyes were filled with killing intent. When he was in the underground cave, Yihao kept bombarding him with spirit coins, which made him furious. It completely ignited the anger in his heart. Therefore, he wanted to kill Yihao at all costs. Therefore, the middle-aged zombie did not avoid the spirit coins and chased after Yihao. Damn it! Yihao saw that the spirit coins couldn't do any damage to the middle-aged zombie. "Kid, you can't escape." The middle-aged zombie chased Yihao out of the hall. As for the middle-aged zombie, the more he looked, the angrier he became. That was because the corpses of the zombies that littered the ground were his blood, sweat, and tears. They were all closely related to his plan. But now Yihao, this reckless brat, had ruined everything. "What should we do?" Yihao was also extremely anxious. Yihao thought anxiously as he felt the middle-aged zombie getting closer and closer to him. After all, the Demon Emperor was not easy to deal with. And the Demon Emperor that had turned into a zombie had several times stronger defense. "Damn it, I can only fight." Yihao suddenly took out some spirit coins again. However, these spirit coins were supreme-grade spirit coins. I reckon that their power should be stronger than low-grade spirit coins. Thinking of this, Yihao was about to use them. Yihao felt the pinch. After all, every supreme-grade spirit coin was equivalent to 1,000,000 low-grade spirit coins. However, at this critical moment, nothing was more precious than one's own life. However, before he could use the spirit coins, the heavenly Een spirit beside him suddenly moved and shot directly at the middle-aged zombie. The heavenly Een spirit was originally a black shadow. At this moment, it emitted some black fog that wrapped around the middle-aged zombie. To Yihao's surprise, the middle-aged zombie actually let out a scream. "Ah, how is this possible? How can such a thing exist and be so powerful? Could it be that the heavenly Een spirit can restrain the zombie?" Hearing the middle-aged zombie scream, Yihao couldn't help but analyze. After all, the heavenly Een spirit was also an Een evil being. It should belong to the same origin as the zombie. Therefore, Yihao wasn't surprised that the heavenly Een spirit could restrain the zombie. However, he was surprised that the heavenly Een spirit had suddenly become so powerful. After all, the heavenly Een spirit had fallen into a deep sleep in the Myriad Kingdom continent. Moreover, it had just woken up not long ago. It seems that it should be related to the ghost spirit fire. Yihao suddenly thought of it. Every zombie's ghost spirit fire had been swallowed by the heavenly Een spirit. At first, he couldn't see any changes in the heavenly Een spirit, and Yihao didn't care about it. After all, the ghost spirit fire was useless to him. Even if the heavenly Een spirit didn't swallow it, he would destroy the ghost spirit fire. But now, it seemed that the heavenly Een spirit could actually fight against the Demon Emperor level zombie. That meant that the heavenly Een spirit swallowing the ghost spirit fire was to increase its strength. What the hell is this thing? Why do I feel that it's so powerful? It's unbelievable. It can actually deal with the Demon Emperor level zombie. Where did the Lord get it from? Everyone saw that the middle-aged zombie was entangled by the heavenly Een spirit, and none of them were running away. Everyone gathered around Yihao and began to discuss. Yihao looked at the heavenly Een spirit's attack. Although he couldn't see any changes, from the middle-aged zombie's state and roar. It could be seen that the middle-aged zombie had been at a disadvantage. "Kid, I won't fight with you anymore. I'll let you go." Perhaps the middle-aged zombie also knew that he wasn't a match for the heavenly Een spirit and suddenly shouted. Yihao ignored the middle-aged zombie. "What a joke. My mission is to kill you in order to summon the Demon Emperor. Moreover, I'm the one who needs to win now, not you. In the beginning, you wanted to kill me because of your strength. Now that you're at a disadvantage, you want to give up? How can there be such a good thing?" Moreover, Yihao felt that the entire Array Pill Divine sect was very strange. Moreover, the middle-aged man was a zombie. Zombies were evil creatures that loved to kill. In order to grow, they would specifically kill living things, regardless of good or evil. It could be said that wherever a zombie appeared, it would be a place of misery and suffering. Moreover, those who were killed by zombies might turn into zombies. Therefore, zombies couldn't be left alive. Moreover, the one in front of him was a powerful and intelligent zombie. It couldn't be left alive. "Lord, please kill him." That's right. Otherwise, with his growth speed, he will seek revenge on us sooner or later. A zombie of this level will only be a disaster if we leave him alive. "Lord, you can't listen to him. You can't leave him alive." Everyone around Yihao said anxiously. Chapter 808. At this moment, the zombie felt that he was going to die of frustration. Originally, waking up was a great thing for him. However, he was bombarded by Yihao's spirit coins. When he finally rushed out, he realized that his plan had been ruined. This naturally aroused boundless fury in his heart. However, just as he was about to kill Yihao, who would have thought that a heavenly Een spirit would appear? After seeing the heavenly Een spirit, he finally knew why his perfect plan had failed. Although his plan had failed, he had already died once. He didn't want to die again. However, he did not even have the chance to escape. "Lad, why don't I tell you all the secrets of the Array Dan sacred sect?" At this moment, he could only try to use Yihao's curiosity to make Yihao let him go. However, Yihao still ignored him. Yihao was also very curious about this secret. At the same time, it was related to his mission. After all, the mission given to him by the system was to kill the boss and find out the secrets of the Array Dan sacred sect. However, Yihao did not think that the middle-aged zombie would be so honest. Therefore, he decided to beat him up and torture him slowly. When the middle-aged zombie saw that Yihao was still not moving, he immediately became anxious. "Lad, if you really can't do it, I will pledge my loyalty to you and serve you as my master. Is that okay?" The middle-aged zombie shouted anxiously. At this moment, he was going all out in order to survive. After all, he had waited for tens of thousands of years. Although he had become a zombie now, he still had his own thoughts. If he was killed again, his soul would really scatter. Ding dong. The mission to kill the boss has changed. Recruiting a boss. Mission completed. You will get a chance to summon a Demon Emperor. What? The mission has changed? When Yihao heard the system's notification, he was very surprised. That was because he had the system for so long. However, there had never been a time when the mission issued by the system changed. However, this changed mission was much more beneficial to him than before. If he took the zombie as a subordinate, he could control it and not let it kill and plunder. At the same time, he would have a Demon Emperor as a subordinate. However, zombies didn't have to swear an oath, so Yihao looked at them warily. "Since you want to serve me as your master, how can I trust you?" Zombie heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Yihao's words. He was really afraid that Yihao would kill him without hesitation. Now that he had a chance to save his life, he was really afraid that Yihao would go back on his word. So he hurriedly said, "I can give you a portion of my ghost spirit fire. You can leave a spiritual imprint on my ghost spirit fire, and you can control my life and death in the future." There's actually such a thing. You had to know what Zombie was talking about. Therefore, when he heard what the zombie said, he couldn't help but feel a trace of surprise. However, Yihao didn't know how to leave a spiritual imprint on the ghost spirit fire. "I can tell you that." The zombie seemed to have seen through Yihao's problem and immediately said, "Then release your ghost spirit fire." Yi Hao said to the zombie after he finished listening to the method of imprinting his spirit. All right. Hearing Yi Hao's words, a ball of flame suddenly flew out from Zombie's head and landed in front of Yi Hao. Yi Hao immediately used the method that Zombie had mentioned and separated a trace of his spiritual energy to enter Zombie's ghost spirit fire. Zombie's ghost spirit fire let out a painful scream. The entire ghost spirit fire trembled, then returned to normal and flew back into Zombie's body. Yi Hao immediately ordered the heavenly Een spirit to release Zombie. This was because after imprinting his spiritual energy on Zombie's ghost spirit fire, he realized that he could easily kill Zombie with just a thought. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for completing the mission. You have obtained a chance to summon the Demon Emperor. Niezheng greets Master. After Zombie was released, he suddenly knelt on the ground and bowed. Niezheng's name is Domineering. Hearing Niezheng's name, Yi Hao couldn't help but nod his head. Who are you? Yi Hao turned to Niezheng and inquired. I am the sect master of the array, Dan Divine Sect. Niezheng's eyes were filled with deep sorrow and reminiscence. SSS. Hearing Niezheng's words, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. After all, the array Dan Divine Sect was the #1 sect in the world tens of thousands of years ago. How could they not be shocked when the person before them was actually the sect master of the array Dan Divine Sect? What shocked them even more was that the sect master of the array Dan Divine Sect was actually serving Yi Hao as his master. Although Niezheng was currently a zombie, his valiant strength was enough to kill everyone present. Even in the Tianyuan kingdom, he would be a top-notch existence. As far as I know, the array Dan Divine Sect was the #1 sect tens of thousands of years ago. How did it suddenly become like this? Yi Hao continued to ask. Regarding this matter, we still have to mention the J-Dragon Sect. Niezheng said resentfully when he heard Yi Hao's question. It turned out that the J-Dragon Sect was originally a subordinate force of the array Dan Divine Sect. However, the J-Dragon Sect harbored evil intentions and had been secretly accumulating strength, ready to attack the array Dan Divine Sect at any time. Although the J-Dragon Sect had concealed themselves very well, the array Dan Divine Sect had still discovered some clues. However, by the time the array Dan Divine Sect had investigated thoroughly, it was already too late. Therefore, in order not to harm the innocent, the array Dan Divine Sect had directly dismissed all of their disciples. In the end, only a few elite disciples and disciples who were loyal and devoted to the array Dan Divine Sect and were unwilling to leave were left. The J-Dragon Sect was vicious by nature and was determined to destroy the array Dan Divine Sect completely. They wanted to exterminate them. After all, the array Dan Divine Sect was the #1 sect in the world. Even the J-Dragon Sect didn't dare to leave any survivors in the array Dan Divine Sect. After all, if one didn't remove the roots when cutting weeds, they would grow again when the spring breeze came. Moreover, the array Dan Divine Sect was the #1 sect. As for Niezheng, he naturally couldn't bear to see his array Dan Divine Sect be destroyed by the ambitious J-Dragon Sect just like that. Therefore, Niezheng and the other powerhouses of the array Dan Divine Sect had joined hands and used a secret technique to move the entire array Dan Divine Sect here. At the same time, they had also set up a formation for the array Dan Divine Sect. That was why the sudden disappearance of the array Dan Divine Sect had shaken the world. At that time, the array Dan Divine Sect had moved in a very secretive manner in order to avoid the J-Dragon Sect's attack. If even the J-Dragon Sect hadn't received any news about it, the other factions wouldn't have received any news either. After that, the various major factions had sent people to search for the array Dan Divine Sect. However, no one had found any clues about the array Dan Divine Sect. If it hadn't been for Yi Hao, who had come here by accident, perhaps no one would have known that the array Dan Divine Sect was hidden in a magical beast forest. Chapter 809. At that time, Niezheng decided to cut off all means of retreat. The Array Pill Sacred Sect was the #1 sect in the ancient demon domain at that time. Naturally, They had obtained countless secret techniques. Among them, there was a secret technique that could turn people into zombies after death. The only flaw of this secret technique was that it required time. The process of becoming a zombie was very slow. After becoming a zombie, it was even more difficult to develop intelligence. Furthermore, zombies without intelligence would kill each other based on their instincts. This was also the reason why Yihao saw so many bones on the ground and zombies attacking each other when he entered the Array Pill sacred sect. Ordinary zombies would instinctively attack each other to fight for the ghost spirit fire. At that time, Niezheng couldn't care less. He only wanted revenge. Therefore, he gathered the entire sect and began to use the secret technique. Niezheng made use of all kinds of array formations to turn the Array Pill sacred sect into a land of extreme negative energy suitable for the growth and cultivation of zombies. At the same time, he set up a powerful illusion array outside the Array Pill sacred sect. Experts wouldn't appear in such a place. Even if they appeared in such a place, they wouldn't be able to see through the array formation. However, no matter how powerful the array formation was, it couldn't stop the changes of history. As time passed, tens of thousands of years had passed. The array formation was no longer as powerful as it used to be. This was also why Demon Venerate Skyblood was able to barge in and leave behind a map that allowed Yihao to find this place. Niezheng's original plan was to wait until he recovered his peak strength and lead the people of the Array Pill sacred sect to rule the world again. However, his wish was beautiful. Who knew that Yihao would appear out of nowhere? Before he could recover his strength, all his subordinates had been wiped out. He had also become Yihao's servant. Actually, according to his secret technique and array formation, Yihao wouldn't be able to subdue him so easily. This was because he had set up a ghost spirit fire array in the hall. If the zombies were killed and the ghost spirit fire wasn't devoured, it would gather in his body through the ghost spirit fire array and become his power. Logically speaking, the power of the ghost spirit fire should be very strong since so many disciples of the Array Pill sacred sect had turned into zombies. Even if all of the zombies were killed, their power would still enter his body through the ghost condensing spirit flame formation. At that time, even if he was all alone, his strength would still be incomparable to his current strength. He would definitely be as powerful as this. It could be said that his plan was perfect. However, he neglected the fact that Yihao possessed the Heavenly Yin Spirit. The Heavenly Yin Spirit was also able to absorb the ghost spirit fire, and all of the ghost spirit fire was devoured by the Heavenly Yin Spirit. Naturally, Niezheng was unable to obtain any power. Of course, at that time, although Niezheng didn't think too much about it, in order to be safe, he still held back. That was the mysterious woman in the coffin. Niezheng actually knew the identity of that mysterious woman. Niezheng had obtained the coffin and the mysterious woman by chance. Back then, Niezheng hadn't paid much attention to them. But once, because Niezheng accidentally looked at the woman's face, he actually went into a daze. In the end, he was awakened by someone. When he asked about the time, he found out that half a month had passed. One had to know that at that time, his cultivation was not just a mere demon emperor level. Because he looked at a woman, and a dead woman at that, he actually lost consciousness for half a month. At that time, he knew that this woman was definitely not ordinary. Later, in order to experiment, he found many people and magical beasts, but without exception, they were all unable to resist the powerful and mysterious power of the woman. They all fell into a daze. Therefore, in the end, for his own safety, Niezheng placed the woman's coffin above him. Only by passing through the woman could they find him. And in Niezheng's opinion, no one could resist the mysterious power of the woman's body. Therefore, even if he didn't become a zombie at that time, he would still be incomparably safe if someone barged into the hall. Indeed, it was as he had imagined. After everyone saw the woman, they all fell into a daze. Even Yihao was the same. But for some reason, Yihao suddenly woke up in the end. This was also something that Niezheng had never expected. It could also be said that the heavens were toying with him. Niezheng's plan could be said to be flawless. But in the end, in front of Yihao, it was still cracked one by one. After hearing Niezheng's words, Yihao sighed. At the same time, he looked at Niezheng, feeling a little embarrassed. After all, Niezheng wasn't a bad person. He spent tens of thousands of years just to take revenge. Who knew that it would be ruined because of him? Yihao looked at Niezheng with a lonely expression and comforted him. It's already been tens of thousands of years. Perhaps the Jade Dragon sect has already perished. No, the Jade Dragon sect has that thing. It's impossible for it to perish, Niezheng said firmly. That thing? What thing? Yihao looked at Niezheng in confusion. One had to know that tens of thousands of years had passed. If the Jade Dragon sect could persist for tens of thousands of years because of one thing, that meant that that thing was definitely a heaven-defying existence. Master, forgive me for not telling you now, because if you know now, it will only be bad for you and not good for you. Niezheng glanced at Yihao's cultivation and said immediately. Yihao looked at Niezheng's resolute expression and didn't want to continue asking, so he could only nod. Then let's pack up and leave this place, Yihao said to Niezheng and walked back into the main hall. His purpose of returning to the main hall was naturally for the cultivation techniques and secret manuals. Seeing these cultivation techniques and secret manuals, Niezheng sighed. The resources here are only 1,000th of the resources of the Array Elixir sect when it was at its peak. The rest has all been plundered by the Jade Dragon sect. SSS. Hearing Niezheng's words, everyone couldn't help but gasp again. There were countless cultivation techniques and martial techniques in the main hall, dazzling everyone. However, this was only 1,000th of the resources of the Array Elixir sect. It could be seen how powerful the Array Elixir sect had been in the past. Don't worry. Sooner or later, I will help you take it back. Yihao patted Niezheng's shoulder when he saw the desolate look on Niezheng's face. Niezheng looked at Yihao and realized that Yihao didn't seem to be lying to him at all. He didn't know why he trusted Yihao from the bottom of his heart. Niezheng nodded deeply. Oh, right. Do you know about the Earth Malevolent Black Chi? Yihao suddenly recalled that the Array Elixir sect had been the number one sect in the past. Chapter 810. Earth Terminus Black Gas. When Niezheng heard Yihao's question, he frowned and thought for a while. But after a while, he shook his head. Master, I've never heard of this before, Niezheng said apologetically. Yihao did not expect that Niezheng, with his status, would not know about the Earth Terminus Black Gas. Master, after all, tens of thousands of years have passed. Something new must have been born. Perhaps the Earth Terminus Black Gas did not have this name in the past, Niezheng explained. When Yihao heard Niezheng's explanation, he felt relieved. Following which, Yihao led everyone out of the palace. As for Niezheng, he reluctantly took one last look at the palace. It was as if the glory of the past was right in front of him. But now, it had turned into smoke. Everything had vanished. Let's go, Yihao said to Niezheng and turned to leave. Niezheng quickly chased after him. Soon, everyone arrived at the exit of the array. Master, there seems to be someone outside. Just as Yihao was about to step out of the array, Niezheng suddenly said. Someone. Yihao couldn't help but frown. That's right. This array was set up by me, so I can see outside. At this moment, there are at least 1,000 people outside. Niezheng nodded and said. That's strange. Yihao frowned and said to Niezheng, Can I have a look too? Sure. As soon as Niezheng's words fell, he walked to the side and fiddled for a moment. Suddenly, the scene in front of everyone changed. A transparent screen appeared in front of them, and they could see the outside world. Of course, it was actually a place. It was just that there was an array here. Because of the array, the people inside the array could not see the outside world. The people outside could not see the inside of the array. Yihao looked outside. There were almost 1,000 people gathered outside. They seemed to be waiting for something. Could it be that someone has discovered the Array Elixir sect? Yihao looked at the scene and asked suspiciously. Because of the posture of the 1,000 people outside, it was obvious that they were waiting for them to go out and catch them all in one fell swoop. However, when Yihao thought about it carefully, he did not realize that there was someone following him when he entered the Array Pill Immortal sect. Master, leave this bunch of trash to me. Nie Zheng said to Yi Hao. All right, let's go out. Yi Hao didn't stop Nie Zheng's request and directly agreed. Yi Hao believed that Nie Zheng must be filled with anger right now. It was time for Nie Zheng to vent his anger. Since these people outside had bumped into the muzzle of his gun, then they couldn't blame him. Then Yi Hao stepped out of the formation. As for Nie Zheng, the demon exalts, and the others, they immediately followed. Big brother, he's out. He's out. He Yan's underling suddenly shouted excitedly. Ha ha! The heavens do not disappoint the faithful. I've been waiting for so long. He Yan laughed when he saw Yi Hao and the others. Brothers, surround them. He Yan shouted. His 1,000 underlings immediately surrounded Yi Hao and the others. The few of you made me wait for so many days. What benefits did you get? Shouldn't you compensate me? Hey, Yin walked up to Yi Hao with a weapon in his hand. His threat was self-evident. Do it. Yi Hao could not be bothered with He Yin and said softly, Where you cough? When He Yin heard Yi Hao's words, he was about to get angry. However, a hand grabbed his neck. He Yin looked at the shriveled Nie Zheng and felt the cold sensation coming from Nie Zheng's hand. He instantly felt a chill in his heart. He felt as though he had fallen into an ice cave. What kind of cultivation is this? Why is he so strong? He Yin struggled in his heart. However, he could not say a word because his neck was being grabbed. Oh my God, what did I just see? Boss has been caught, and he can't even fight back. At this moment, He Yan's underlings were shocked when they saw He Yin being grabbed by Nie Zheng like a little chick. Hurry up and say, boss. Suddenly, one of the underlings looked at Nie Zheng's back. Bang! A crisp sound of collision was heard. The weapon in the underling's hand did not hurt Nie Zheng at all. How was this possible? When everyone saw this scene, they could not help but gulp. Many of them even took half a step back in fear. Die! Nie Zheng carried He Yin and turned to look at the underling. The underling's face was filled with struggle. Then his eyes widened and he fell to the ground. When everyone saw this scene, the fear in their hearts grew even stronger. This was because they did not see how Nie Zheng attacked. In the end, the underling died. At this moment, Nie Zheng was like the Grim Reaper to everyone. He Yin was still struggling. However, when he saw his underling die, his face turned ashen and he stopped struggling. At this moment, He Yan's body was covered in cold sweat. He had never felt that death was so close to him. At this moment, He Yin was filled with regret. If he had known, he would not have coveted the treasure. If he had not coveted the treasure and wanted to rob Yi Hao, he would not have ended up in this state. Now, he could not even beg for mercy. This meant that his life was in Nie Zheng's hands. He could only resign himself to fate after a few more breaths of time. Run! At this moment, someone among the 1,000 underlings shouted, and they immediately scattered in all directions. After all, in their eyes, Nie Zheng was too strong. They could not summon up the courage to fight Nie Zheng. Now that they had a chance to escape, they naturally had to grab it. Try to run? Looking at the fleeing crowd, Nie Zheng snorted coldly. Then, he began to release corpse poison. The corpse poison on Nie Zheng's body quickly spread in all directions. The corpse poison on Nie Zheng's body was much stronger than that of the demon supremacy zombies. At the same time, the range of its release was also very large. In the blink of an eye, the corpse poison had surrounded everyone. Oh, what is this? No, I feel like I'm going to die. Spare me, please spare me. Suddenly, everyone screamed and begged for mercy. So strong. Yi Hao and the rest could not help but exclaim when they saw Nie Zheng's mighty power. After a while, everyone stopped breathing. However, the strange thing was that they did not collapse. Instead, they stood there straight. You turned them all into zombies? Yi Hao asked when he saw this scene. Yes, Master. I can create an army of zombies from Master that can look down on everything, Nie Zheng said somewhat weakly at this moment. Chapter 811. What are the strength of these zombies? Yi Hao asked as he looked at the zombies. They are at the peak of the Demon King realm now. However, they will reach the initial Demon Emperor realm in a few days. Nie Zheng said, Of course, there's another way for them to reach the demon's sovereign realm quickly. What is it? Yihao was curious when he heard Niezheng's words. Master, please take a look, Niezheng said with a strange smile. Then, the zombies started killing each other. When Yihao saw this, he instantly understood what Niezheng was trying to do. Niezheng wanted to rely on his zombies to constantly devour the ghost spirit flame and make them stronger. After all, every night in the Pill Formation Divine sect, they would have to watch the zombies kill each other. Those zombies were at the Demon Emperor realm. They were much more spectacular than the zombies in front of them. However, He Yin, who was in Niezheng's hands, was considered a killer. Compared to the zombies in front of them, he was nothing. Soon, He Yin started vomiting. I think you're not bad. Why don't you become my general and serve the people with me? Niezheng said to He Yin. What? No, I don't want to. He Yin struggled in panic when he heard Niezheng's words. However, no matter how hard he struggled, he could not avoid the strong corpse poison entering his body and devouring his vitality. In the blink of an eye, He Yin's vitality disappeared. After a while, He Yin suddenly said, "Greetings, Master." If one looked carefully, they would see that He Yin did not have any vitality left. Call me General Nie in the future. Master is here, Niezheng said to He Yin. He Yin immediately looked at Yihao and said, Master. Yihao looked at He Yin's aura and realized that He Yin's strength was still at the demon's sovereign realm. He was shocked. At this moment, there were only about 60 zombies left. These zombies were all at the level of Devil Emperors. Master, can you give me a few blood martial elixirs? Niezheng asked Yihao. Blood martial elixirs? Didn't they say that zombies can't consume pills? Hearing Niezheng's words, Yihao asked in confusion. That's right. Zombies can't take normal pills. Niezheng nodded. But after my experiments, I was able to create the blood martial pill. The blood martial pill is concocted from the blood essence of magical beasts. It is very useful for both humans and zombies. The effect of the blood martial pill on zombies is more than 10 times that of humans. Niezheng proudly said. I see. Yihao finally understood why no one from the Array Elixir Sacred Sect possessed anything but the blood martial elixir. It seemed that Niezheng was really meticulous. He had even thought about the growth of the zombies. Most importantly, Niezheng possessed a formidable talent in alchemy. He was actually able to develop a pill that could be fed to zombies. It had to be known that in the history of the ancient demon domain, up until now, there had never been any pills for zombies to consume. Yihao immediately took out some blood martial pills and handed them to Niezheng. Niezheng immediately distributed the blood martial pills to the zombies. As for the zombies, they didn't have any intelligence. They were all in a daze. But when they saw the blood martial pills, it was as if they had seen the ghost spirit fire. Their eyes lit up, and they immediately swallowed the pills. Roar! Then, the zombies let out excited cries. Their cultivation increased greatly. They are so powerful. Yihao saw the zombies' cultivation increase and knew what Niezheng was talking about. The blood martial pills that the zombies consumed were more than 10 times that of humans. It was not an exaggeration. In the end, Niezheng asked for some more pills from Yihao. The zombies' cultivation had all reached the peak of the Nephilim Emperor realm. Everyone inwardly clicked their tongues. If Niezheng really did it and created such a powerful zombie army, for Yihao, it definitely wouldn't be a joke. But when they thought about it, they could not help but feel terrified. If Yihao did not discover the Array Pill Sacred Sect, when Niezheng woke up and led the Array Pill Sacred Sect's zombie army, no one in the world would be able to stop him. After all, the Array Pill Sacred Sect zombies were many in number, and they were very powerful. Plus, the zombies had the ability to turn people into zombies after killing them. They could also use the blood martial pills to increase the zombies' cultivation quickly. If that was the case, perhaps Niezheng's revenge could really be achieved. At that time, the entire ancient demon domain would probably fall into his hands. Everyone could not help secretly rejoicing that Niezheng already became Yihao's subordinate. Otherwise, it would be simply terrifying. Then, Niezheng asked Yihao for some Nephilim Emperor-level blood marshal pills. After the zombies took the pills, their cultivation increased again. After taking the blood marshal pills 3 to 4 times, all the zombies' cultivation had reached the Nephilim Emperor realm. At this moment, everyone could only describe Niezheng as a freak. There were 50 to 60 Nephilim Emperors, and they were all cultivated in a short period of time. With so many Nephilim Emperors, they could definitely sweep through the Rain Domain. However, Niezheng could only increase the strength of the zombies to the Nephilim Emperor level quickly. If they wanted to increase the cultivation of the zombies quickly, they could only kill each other and devour the ghost spirit fire. However, Yihao would not allow Niezheng to do that. After all, Yihao only killed people who deserved to be killed. If he also killed the innocent, then he would be no different from a demon. His goal was to unify the ancient demon sector, not to turn it into a living hell. After all, even if he did unify the ancient demon sector, it would be meaningless if the rest were zombies. However, he still had many enemies. Therefore, the zombies would not lack targets to kill. However, he had to be careful when using the zombies. After all, if people knew that he had zombies under his command, he would become the public enemy in an instant. At that time, some experts would come to deal with him. Therefore, no matter how powerful Niezheng was, he had to be careful when using the zombies. The zombies were like a double-edged sword. If he used them well, everything would be good. If he did not use them well, it would bring him a lot of trouble. Just like the people around him, they kept a certain distance from Niezheng. If it wasn't for the fact that Niezheng was their subordinate, these people would probably fight to the death with Niezheng. In the eyes of humans, zombies were evil creatures that loved to kill. Chapter 8:12. Every time the zombies appeared, there would be a massacre of humans. This was because the zombies killed indiscriminately. In their eyes, as long as there was a living creature, they would kill it. They would not let go of the elderly or the children. Therefore, the zombies had become the public enemy of the entire human race. However, Yihao was not afraid of this because he had Niezheng under his control. If Niezheng did not do anything outrageous, the zombie army would not do it either. Niezheng, these elixirs are for you. Take these zombies and hunt for demonic beasts. Yihao took out a large amount of blood marshal elixirs and handed them to Niezheng. It was not that he did not want to take Niezheng with him. Moreover, Niezheng would be safer. However, he was on a Tianyuan academy, which was full of experts. He was worried that someone would recognize the identities of Niezheng and the other zombies. After all, there was no sign of life on Niezheng. It was very easy for others to be suspicious about this. By the way, try not to kill humans. If they provoke you, it's another matter. Yihao did not forget to remind Niezheng. Yes, master. Niezheng suddenly took out a jade slip and said, "This is a teleportation talisman. Once I use it, I will immediately arrive at master's side." Okay. Yihao took the teleportation talisman and could not help but feel surprised. However, this teleportation talisman was equivalent to giving him an extra life-saving talisman. After all, he could summon Niezheng at any time. Yihao bid farewell to Niezheng and continued to lead the group to Tianyuan Academy. It had already been a month, and the strength of the disciples had also increased by a large margin. The strength of the outer disciples had reached the 3rd Order Demon Emperor on average. The strength of the inner disciples had all reached the 8th Order Demon Emperor. 2 of them had even reached the 9th Order Demon Emperor. This trip to the Array Elixir sect was Yihao's biggest gain. The blood marshal elixirs alone could increase the strength of the disciples again. Therefore, Yihao did not let the disciples kill demonic beasts. Instead, he led the disciples to hurry on with the journey because there were only 2 months left. If they did not hurry on with the journey, they might not be able to reach Tianyuan Academy. Although they were rushing on with the journey, they would take the blood marshal elixirs and cultivate hard every time they rested. 2 months later, the Tianyuan Academy was bustling with activity. Everyone was looking forward to it. This was because the first academy would challenge the Tianyuan Academy in a few days. Therefore, many people from the Tianyuan kingdom rushed to the Tianyuan Academy to watch the battle. However, most of the people were only here to broaden their horizons and see the magnificence of the Tianyuan Academy's disciples. After all, Tianyuan Academy, as the Royal Academy of Tianyuan Kingdom, was very attractive to many people. As for the First Academy, to be honest, many people did not think much of it. After all, it had only been a few months since the establishment of the academy. Moreover, the disciples that were recruited were all untalented. How could such an academy be compared to Tianyuan Academy? After all, the Tianyuan Kingdom had existed for a long time. Furthermore, it was the Royal Academy. All the disciples it had recruited were the most talented ones. It was easy to tell who was stronger and who was weaker at a glance. It's almost time. Why haven't I seen that guy from the First Academy? I think he probably doesn't dare to come. That can't be. The First Academy took the initiative to issue the challenge. So what? If he comes to challenge and loses, it will be a disgrace. If it were me, I would definitely not come. I am suspecting that the First Academy announced the challenge to the Tianyuan Academy just to promote their reputation. Now that you mention it, I think it's very possible. Master Wong, you said that the Master and the rest are not here yet. At this moment, the Masters of the Rain Domain had already arrived at the Tianyuan Academy. At this moment, they were listening to the discussions of the people around them in the restaurant of the Tianyuan Academy's affiliated city. Although the Tianyuan Academy was an academy, it was very large. However, it was still very huge. Just the 4 sides of the academy alone had 4 affiliated cities. These cities belonged to the Tianyuan Academy, and they were run by the academy. They were used for the daily needs of the disciples and for them to purchase cultivation resources. They were also used by the disciples who came for the annual assessment to rest. It could be said that the Tianyuan Academy was very powerful and was taken care of by the Tianyuan Kingdom. At this moment, the 4 affiliated cities of the Tianyuan Academy were already packed with people. The places to stay had already been snatched up by the people. It could be said that this was much more lively than the recruitment of disciples in the Tianyuan Kingdom. The income from the past few days had made the Tianyuan Academy a lot of money. How would I know? I only hope that nothing bad will happen to the Lord and the others. At this moment, the Wong family head said with a worried look, "Dong, what's that sound?" At this moment, a loud bell rang. It seems to be coming from the Tianyuan Academy. Let's go and take a look. The masters looked at each other and immediately rushed towards the Tianyuan Academy. Along the way, there were many people rushing towards the Tianyuan Academy. What do you think is going on? Why would the bell ring in the Tianyuan Academy for no reason? Who knows? I heard that every time the bell rings in the Tianyuan Academy, something big will happen. Let's hurry over and take a look. We don't want to miss anything. What's going on? When the crowd arrived at the Tianyuan Academy, they saw that there were already 20 blood-red arenas in the square of the Tianyuan Academy. The crowd looked at the 20 arenas in confusion. At this moment, there was a young man standing on each of the arenas. These young men were all in high spirits and exuded a strong and powerful aura. Are these the disciples that the Tianyuan Academy is sending out to take on the challengers? It's indeed the Tianyuan Academy. The aura of these disciples seems to be very strong. Looking at the Tianyuan Academy's stance, it seems like they're trying to establish their dominance. The crowd listened to the sound of drums and looked at the young men on the arenas. The crowd discussed among themselves. At this moment, dozens of roars were heard. From the direction of the Tianyuan Academy, more than 20 figures appeared and leaped onto the 20 arenas. Who are these people? Seeing the sudden appearance of the 20 people, the crowd could not help but exclaim in surprise. Just as the crowd was confused, the 20 young men on the arenas flew out at the same time. Hiss! Seeing this scene, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. What did I just see? The crowd widened their eyes and looked at the 20 people on the arenas in disbelief. Chapter 8:13. What Bullsh *T First Academy. I think it's not bad to be the last. How dare they challenge Tianyuan Academy? We'll make sure they don't return. I think First Academy is not here yet. Don't tell me they don't dare to come. With senior brother choose cultivation, I think he can defeat First Academy alone. At this moment, the disciples of Tianyuan Academy were chatting merrily. When they talked about First Academy, their faces were full of disdain. However, when they talked about Senior Brother Chu, all the disciples were full of admiration. At this moment, a purple-robed young man was standing in the middle of the ring. At this moment, the young man had an arrogant look on his face. He is Tianyuan Academy's #1 inner disciple, Chu Feng. I heard that Chu Feng has reached the peak of Demon Emperor before the age of 30. I wonder if it's true. Hiss. Reaching the peak of Demon Emperor before the age of 30? Is it true? This is Tianyuan Academy. He said it himself. How can it be false? Look at Chu Feng's heroic face. He should be a proud son of heaven. At this moment, the onlookers could not help but look at Chu Feng. That's Chu Feng. It looks like his strength is extraordinary. I think he's definitely the strongest opponent of Tianyuan Academy. I wonder how the Lord and the others are doing now. At this moment, all the family heads were looking at Chu Feng with worried looks on their faces. Dean, after 3 months of cultivation, all the disciples' cultivations have greatly improved. That's right. The dean took action personally and used up so much of the academy's resources. Naturally, the disciples' cultivation has improved tremendously. The talents of this batch of disciples are not bad. It's good that they have improved to this extent. As for the elders of the Tianyuan Academy, they were looking at the disciples in the arena with a satisfied look on their faces. Didn't you say that the people from Rain Domain are here? Why haven't I seen the people from First Academy? The dean, who was standing in front, suddenly asked. Reporting to the headmaster, the people from the Rain Domain arrived 7 days ago. Our men have been keeping watch, but we have not seen anyone from the First Academy. An elder walked up to the headmaster and reported respectfully. That's strange. The First Academy was the one who issued the challenge. Are they going back on their word? The dean frowned. Mr. Dean, do you think the First Academy is hiding something? Suddenly, one of the elders asked. Humph. An elder sneered. Are you kidding me? You know that First Academy is recruiting disciples. What kind of trash are those disciples? Where's the age limit? What tricks can the First Academy play? Hearing this elder's cold snort, the other elders nodded their heads. In the past 3 months, the Tianyuan Academy had sent many people to investigate the First Academy. Although the development and construction of the First Academy had exceeded their expectations. However, the talents of the disciples of the First Academy left them speechless. Even if the Tianyuan Academy were to give those disciples to the First Academy for free, they would not want them. They didn't know what First Academy was thinking. Since they had so many resources, why didn't they use them to groom talented disciples? Why did they choose to groom ordinary disciples? In their opinion, the First Academy was wasting resources for nothing. Those without talent were destined to be martial artists. They were destined to be trash who couldn't cultivate. Even if they wasted resources, they wouldn't achieve much in the future. Thus, from their point of view, those without talent simply did not have the qualifications to cultivate and compete for resources with those with good aptitudes. First, recruiting so many disciples with no aptitude, in their eyes, was a completely idiotic act. Mr. President, although the disciples of the First Academy are nothing much, they do have a lot of resources. If we win against the First Academy this time, we can take over the resources of the First Academy. An elder said greedily, who said that those disciples are useless. We can turn them into the slaves and servants of Tianyuan Academy. Another elder said with a sinister look, Ha ha. Hearing the words of the two elders, the crowd immediately burst into laughter. Even the headmaster had a smile on his face. Let's go. It seems like First Academy doesn't dare to come today. Let's go back. The dean took another look at the 20 disciples in the arena and ordered the elders. Hold on, Dean. Look at that group. Who are they? Just as the elders were about to leave, one of them suddenly spoke up. Aren't they just a group of beggars? Why did they come to Tianyuan Academy? Send someone to chase them out. An elder looked over and said with disgust, No, look at their clothes. They look like people from First Academy. The elder continued, Are you kidding? No matter how trashy First Academy is, their clothes shouldn't be so tattered. That's right. Look at those people. They are all disheveled and their clothes are tattered. They are worse than beggars. If this is really First Academy, they're making a fool of themselves. The elders sneered. On the other hand, the dean narrowed his eyes and looked solemn. Something is wrong. Suddenly, the dean said in a deep voice, "What's wrong, Dean?" When the elders saw the strange look on the dean's face, they stopped laughing and looked at him in confusion. They must have crossed the magical beast forest from First Academy to Tianyuan Academy. The dean looked at the elders and said, "What? Crossed the magical beast forest? Are they crazy? How lucky are they to have made it here alive?" When the elders heard the dean's words, they exclaimed, "Look at the bloodstains on their bodies. One look, and I can tell that they have been through a war. If they had taken the official road, they would not be in such a state. Moreover, the people from Rain Domain arrived first. Besides the magical beast forest, there is only one other official road from Rain Domain to here. Obviously, they did not come together." The dean looked into the distance at the group of people in tattered clothes covered in blood as he slowly analyzed the situation. When the elders heard the dean's words, although they did not want to believe it, they had to believe that Yi Hao and the rest had crossed the magical beast forest to come here. At that moment, all the elders were shocked. They could not help but admire the spirit of First Academy. Chapter 8:14. However, they did not expect the First Academy to be able to do it. Moreover, they were able to arrive here safely. At this moment, the dean looked regretful. If I had known that they would be so bold, I would have sent people to kill them. To be honest, even the dean himself was shocked by Yi Hao's ability to traverse the magical beast forest. If he was alone, traversing the magical beast forest was nothing. However, if he were to lead a group of disciples through the magical beast forest safely, he could not guarantee that he could do it. After all, the magical beast forest was filled with danger. At this moment, he could not help but admire Yi Hao's courage and luck. This was because traversing the magical beast forest could result in complete annihilation if one was not careful. Who are these people? Look at their tattered clothes. Why do they look like beggars? Could it be that beggars want to join in the fun? I guess so. Yi Hao led his disciples and listened to the discussions around him. He immediately blushed with shame. Looking at the disciples' clothes, they were indeed tattered. However, there was no other choice. They had been rushing along the way, and they had encountered many powerful magical beasts. There was no other choice but to let the disciples kill them. If the disciples could not handle them, the demon honorables would do it. If they could not handle them, they would bombard them with spiritual stones. If that did not work, the disciples could only escape. Therefore, this journey was supposed to be a training for the disciples. In the end, it became a training for everyone. Of course, along the way, they had escaped death many times. That was why they were in such a state. Moreover, time was tight. They did not have time to change their clothes. But now that things had come to this, Yi Hao couldn't care less. He gave a signal to a demon sovereign, and that demon sovereign immediately understood. Immediately, he channeled his strength and shouted out loudly, "The disciples of the First Academy are here to challenge the Tianyuan Academy." Suddenly, a loud voice reverberated in the sky above the Tianyuan Academy. Hearing that voice, everyone's expressions changed. Then, they turned their gazes to the crowd. "No way. What did he say? The First Academy? Why are the disciples of the First Academy dressed like beggars? Is this a joke? I'm thinking that the First Academy is not joking, right? Now I'm wondering if I heard wrongly, or if I saw wrongly." At this moment, when everyone saw the way Yi Hao and the others were dressed, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva in shock. Where did this stinky beggar come from? Hurry up and get out of here. Don't force me to make a move. Suddenly, an outer yard disciple who was standing on the arena said with a face full of disgust, "I've always heard that the First Academy is trash, and I didn't believe it. Now that I see it, it's true. Wearing such tattered clothes, what kind of Tom, Dick, and Harry dares to open an academy? Why don't they take a piss and look at themselves in the mirror? If it were me, I would just leave this place." Why should I stay here and embarrass myself? At this moment, the young men standing on the ring began to mock him. All of them were in high spirits, completely ignoring Yi Hao and the others. My lord, the Tianyuan Academy is too arrogant. Let me take care of them, Huka said angrily when she heard what the Tianyuan Academy disciple had said. There's no need to discuss with a bunch of people who are about to be defeated, Yi Hao said with a light smile. At this moment, a middle-aged man walked out from the Tianyuan Academy. Are you guys from the First Academy? The middle-aged man was arrogant and looked at Yi Hao with disdain. This is the president of the First Academy. Who are you? A demon stepped forward and asked. I'm a handyman in the Tianyuan Academy. Our president and elders are too busy to deal with such trivial matters. Hence, I'm in charge of this challenge. The middle-aged man said coldly. Wow. When the crowd heard what the middle-aged man had said, there was an uproar. The First Academy is an academy after all. The Tianyuan Academy really doesn't respect the First Academy. I didn't expect the Tianyuan Academy to be so disrespectful to the First Academy. It's fine if the president doesn't come out, but even the elders don't come out. They just sent a handyman. I reckon the First Academy's reputation will be completely ruined. I didn't expect the president of the First Academy to be so young. You're courting death. When the demons under Yi Hao heard what the middle-aged man had said, they were enraged. This was because the middle-aged man had said that he didn't respect Yi Hao at all. They couldn't take it lying down. Forget it. Why bother with a dog? Yi Hao laughed when he saw the middle-aged man's smug face. You? The middle-aged man didn't expect Yi Hao to scold him in his face. He snorted coldly and said, I don't think the First Academy is well-mannered. Even the president has cursed. I don't think your disciple is any better. When the crowd heard what the middle-aged man had said, they couldn't help but look at Yi Hao. They wanted to see how Yi Hao would handle this. Well-mannered. Yi Hao lowered his head and smiled. Then, he suddenly moved and punched the middle-aged man. Let me show you what well-mannered means. The middle-aged man was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood and struggled to fall to the ground. He didn't understand why Yi Hao had dared to attack him. You're just a handyman. How dare you talk to the president about well-mannered? Are you worthy? Yi Hao's cold voice rang in everyone's ears. How arrogant. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but look at Yi Hao. Obviously, no one had expected Yi Hao to attack the people from Tianyuan Academy. Awesome. At this moment, the disciples behind Yi Hao were all smiling when they saw this scene. Our Lord is still so arrogant. When the family head saw that Tianyuan Academy had sent a handyman to humiliate Yi Hao, they were all furious. However, when they saw Yi Hao send the middle-aged man flying with a punch, they smiled. Come, who still wants to talk to me about well-mannered? Yi Hao looked at Tianyuan Academy. Yi Hao was here to challenge Tianyuan Academy. Naturally, he wouldn't be intimidated by Tianyuan Academy's show of strength. At this moment, in Tianyuan Academy's arena, Chu Feng was looking at Yi Hao with a strong desire to fight. This president of Tianyuan Academy is really arrogant. How dare he hurt our people? President, let me teach them a lesson. They don't know what's good for them. How dare they be so arrogant in Tianyuan Academy? At this moment, the elders of the Heavenly Yuan Academy all had furious expressions on their faces. They had sent a handyman just to humiliate Yi Hao. Chapter 8:15. Although the one who was beaten up was only a servant disciple, this was equivalent to Yi Hao slapping the Tianyuan Academy and the Tianyuan Academy in the face. No, there are so many people watching. Don't act rashly. Otherwise, the Tianyuan Academy will become a laughing stock. The dean's face was gloomy, but he tried to restrain himself. After all, the Tianyuan Academy was at fault. The Tianyuan Academy had sent a servant disciple to humiliate Yi Hao in order to intimidate Yi Hao. At the same time, he wanted to see what kind of character and attitude Yi Hao had. However, Yi Hao's actions were completely beyond his expectations. He had thought of many possibilities. There was a possibility that Yi Hao would suffer in silence because he was in someone else's territory, or that Yi Hao would continue his discussion with the servant disciple. No matter what, Yi Hao's reputation would be greatly damaged. However, he had never expected Yi Hao to act so directly. Although the dean was very unhappy, he couldn't help but admire Yi Hao's actions. This was the best solution. If this had happened to him, he might not have dared to do so. However, one needs to have the ability to be arrogant. The dean looked at Yi Hao with a murderous look in his eyes. Her Highness the Princess has arrived. Suddenly, a voice was heard. A group of people on horses was heading towards them from afar. At the same time, there was a dazzling palanquin in the middle of the group. Why is the princess here? Why didn't I receive any news? The dean couldn't help but frown when he saw the princess's entourage. The other elders also shook their heads, their faces filled with confusion. Come with me to welcome the princess. Although the dean didn't understand, he still instructed the elders. The princess was also a student of the Tianyuan Academy. However, she was a princess. Her status was higher than theirs. Therefore, no matter how high their status was, they still had to be respectful when they saw the princess. Princess, Yi Hao couldn't help but frown when he heard the voice. The princess who could come here had to be the princess of the Tianyuan kingdom. The Rain Domain was a subordinate force of the Tianyuan kingdom. He had conquered the Rain Domain and made it his own. Moreover, he had opened an academy in the Rain Domain. Therefore, he had no choice but to be on his guard now that someone from the royal family had appeared. It was obvious that the family leaders and the demon sovereigns were nervous when they heard that the princess had appeared. They couldn't help but move closer to Yi Hao. The surrounding crowd was also shocked. Clearly, they did not expect the princess of the Tianyuan kingdom to come here. Greetings, Your Highness. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy immediately bowed to the palanquin along with the other elders. Most of the onlookers were from the Tianyuan kingdom. They bowed slightly to show their respect to the royal family. Chu Feng greets Your Highness. May Your Highness remain young forever. At this moment, Chu Feng, who was dressed in purple, had also walked down from the arena. He led the disciples of the Heavenly Yuan Academy and bowed to the palanquin with a confident smile on his face. Young Master Chu Feng is the pride of our Tianyuan kingdom. There's no need to be so courteous. A pleasant voice came from a sedan. Thank you, Your Highness. Chu Feng stood up. I heard that Your Highness hasn't found a suitable husband. Do you think Princess Chu Feng has a chance? I've heard that Her Highness is as beautiful as a fairy, and young Master Chu Feng is handsome and talented. I think it's very possible. I also heard that in the Tianyuan Academy, young Master Chu Feng has confessed his love to Your Highness more than once. In our Tianyuan kingdom, who can compare to young Master Chu Feng? Therefore, Your Highness will definitely take a fancy to young Master Chu Feng. At this moment, Chu Feng was overjoyed when he heard the discussions around him. Indeed, he had been chasing after the princess all this time, not only because of her status, but also because of her appearance. She was very beautiful and moving. It was just that Her Highness the Princess had been keeping him at a distance of 1,000 miles, which made him feel very displeased. But there was nothing he could do about it. Who asked her to be of such a high status? Therefore, in order to get the princess, he could tolerate everything. Chu Feng suddenly looked to the side. Yi Hao and the others were still standing. They didn't even bow to him. He couldn't help but frown. Chu Feng was suddenly delighted. He thought that it was time for him to perform. How dare you not bow to Your Highness when you see her? Chu Feng looked at Yi Hao and shouted coldly. Hearing Chu Feng's words, everyone's eyes immediately fell on Yi Hao and the others. Yi Hao saw Chu Feng's provocative gaze and immediately felt unhappy. He hadn't provoked Chu Feng yet. He didn't expect Chu Feng to provoke him first. At this moment, many family heads and elders couldn't help but frown. They looked at Yi Hao and didn't know what to do. After all, if it was the Rain Domain of the past, they would naturally bow to the princess when they saw her. However, the current Rain Domain was no longer the Rain Domain of the past. It had been conquered by Yi Hao. To be clear, the Rain Domain no longer belonged to the Tianyuan kingdom. In their opinion, with Yi Hao's character, he would never bow to the Tianyuan kingdom's princess. This was because if Yi Hao bowed to the Tianyuan kingdom's princess, it would be equivalent to lowering his head. That would also mean that Yi Hao had bowed to the Tianyuan kingdom. In everyone's opinion, Yihao would never do so. However, if Yihao didn't do so, he would be caught red-handed. It would be equivalent to declaring war with the Tianyuan kingdom. Therefore, Chu Feng's words were equivalent to putting Yi Hao in an abyss of suffering. He couldn't advance or retreat. At this moment, the space suddenly became quiet. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Hao. Bastard, I will kill you sooner or later. Yi Hao looked at Chu Feng with a murderous gaze. At this moment, Yi Hao was also thinking of a countermeasure. After all, if he bowed to the Tianyuan kingdom now, it would be immoral to attack the Tianyuan kingdom in the future. But all right, I said there's no need for such formalities. I just want to watch the competition. Suddenly, a voice from the sedan chair interrupted the silence. Why does this voice sound so familiar? The voice from the sedan chair interrupted Yi Hao's thoughts. Yi Hao was puzzled when he heard the voice from the sedan chair. In fact, what puzzled him even more was that the princess in the sedan chair seemed to be helping him. After all, if she continued to force him, he would have to make a choice. Should he bow to the princess or not bow to the Tianyuan kingdom? However, the princess's words directly skipped this topic. For the time being, he didn't need to worry about it or make a choice. Chapter 8:16. On the other hand, when Chu Feng heard what the princess had said, he was unhappy. However, when he thought of the challenge, he couldn't help but smile. In his opinion, he was confident that he could defeat the 20 disciples from the First Academy with his strength. He was already looking forward to performing well in front of the crowd and suppressing the First Academy's reputation. At the same time, he wanted to show off in front of the princess. Since Your Highness wants to watch the competition, why don't we start now? Although the dean couldn't guess what the princess was up to, he immediately said respectfully, Let's start then." A pleasant voice came from the palanquin again. "In that case, let me announce the rules. The Tianyuan Academy will set up 20 arenas, and they will be divided into the inner and outer sections. The First Academy can send out disciples to challenge any of our disciples. Of course, it has to be the outer section challenging the outer section, and the inner section challenging the inner section." The dean stood out and introduced the 20 arenas. "Since the First Academy is challenging us, we have to play a big game." At this moment, an elder stood out and said, "Oh, what do you think? You can speak your mind." The dean pretended to be interested and asked, "Why don't we make an agreement? If the First Academy loses, they'll join our Tianyuan Academy unconditionally. Although we don't think much of the First Academy, it's still a good thing." The elder said with a smile, "What did you say?" The crowd behind Yihao was instantly enraged. The elder's words implied that he didn't care about the First Academy at all. Moreover, he had said such words in front of so many people. It was obviously a slap to the First Academy's face. As for the surrounding crowd, they all turned their gazes to Yihao. They wanted to know how Yihao would resolve this matter. After all, this was the Tianyuan Academy. Anyone would be furious if the First Academy was humiliated like this. I didn't say anything. This is the truth. Moreover, the competition is so grand. If there is no bet, it would be too boring." The elder continued to say with a smile. He didn't care about the crowd's anger at all. In the eyes of the Tianyuan Academy, the angrier the people from the First Academy were, the more they would care. At this moment, the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy could not wait for the competition to start so that they could humiliate the First Academy. After all, after 3 months of soaking in the medicinal bath, their cultivation had improved greatly. Thus, at that moment, they were impatient to display their strength. "We can have a bet, but what if your Tianyuan Academy loses?" Yihao looked at the elder and asked. When the elder heard Yihao's question, he was stunned. Then, he laughed out loud. "Are you kidding? Are you still dreaming? Do you really think that the First Academy can win? What a joke. What I'm asking is, if Tianyuan Academy loses, what should you do?" Yihao repeated in a low voice. "You." A trace of fear appeared in the elder's heart when he heard Yihao's tone. But then he remembered that this was the Tianyuan Academy. What was there to be afraid of? He said firmly, "Our Tianyuan Academy will not lose. But if we lose, We will unconditionally merge with the First Academy. But you won't have the chance to do so. Humph. Yi Hao sneered and said in a disdainful tone, with your status, you're just an elder. I don't think you have the right to make this decision. You'd better ask your dean, lest you get punished when the time comes. The elder had not expected that Yi Hao would dare to look down on him. He was furious, but the dean stopped him. I am the dean of the Tianyuan Academy. I will accept this bet, the dean said confidently. That's good too. Princess, please be our witness. Yi Hao did not expect the princess to be his witness. After all, the Tianyuan Academy was backed by the royal family. On the other hand, they had decided to wear the same pair of pants. The reason Yi Hao said this was so that if the Tianyuan Academy wanted to go back on their word, they would not only be humiliating the Tianyuan Academy, but also the royal family. Very well, let this princess be the witness. This princess will definitely not be partial to any side. The princess's voice sounded from the palanquin. However, no one took the princess's words seriously. It was not that the princess's words had no weight. Everyone knew about the relationship between the Tianyuan Academy and the royal family. They also knew that with the strength of the Tianyuan Academy, they would definitely win. Hence, in the eyes of the crowd, this was equivalent to the princess agreeing to the Tianyuan Academy's request. When the Tianyuan Academy won, she would openly help the Tianyuan Academy take over the First Academy. At this moment, many people looked at Yi Hao with pity. They thought that Yi Hao was too impulsive. He had actually gambled the entire First Academy. Yi Hao was already mentally prepared. Hence, he did not take the princess's words seriously. Since that is the case, let the competition begin. Yi Hao said to the crowd, All right, Dean Yi, please send out the geniuses of the First Academy to challenge us. The dean emphasized the word geniuses. It was obvious that he was mocking Yi Hao. Let's challenge the outer sect first, Yi Hao said as he glanced at the outer sect arena. In fact, Yi Hao was already full of confidence in his outer sect disciples. It was basically impossible for them to lose. It's up to your mood. No matter who you send out, the Tianyuan Academy will accept it. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy said indifferently. Wang Kai, go ahead. Pick anyone of them to play with. Yi Hao said to Wang Kai. Yes. Upon hearing Yi Hao's words, Wang Kai immediately walked out. At this moment, Wang Kai was looking forward to defeating the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy and venting his anger. At the same time, his 3 months of hard work would not be in vain. He had escaped death by the skin of his teeth. Come on, trash from the First Academy. Come and challenge me if you have the ability. I am the weakest among the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy. I am only a second-order demon emperor. Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. The moment Wang Kai walked out, an outer sect disciple stood on the arena and spoke in an arrogant tone while looking at Wang Kai. This disciple was a middle-grade talent. He was originally ranked in the top 10 among the outer sect disciples. However, after 3 months of medicinal baths, his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. In 3 months, he had advanced by 2 levels and reached the second-order demon emperor. Chapter 817. However, he managed to do it through the medicinal bath. Hence, he could not suppress the excitement in his heart. When he saw Wang Kai, he wanted to show off his strength. In his opinion, based on his current cultivation, he could definitely be ranked in the top 5 among the outer disciples. Moreover, he had heard that the disciples recruited by the First Academy were trash. In his opinion, it would be a piece of cake for him to deal with Wang Kai. At this moment, he could already see himself humiliating Wang Kai. Moreover, the dean had said that whoever defeated the First Academy would receive a large amount of cultivation resources. Hence, even if it was for the cultivation resources, he had to win. Moreover, there were so many people watching. This was definitely a good opportunity for him to show off. The disciples of the Tianyuan Academy are indeed extraordinary. Even the 10th outer disciple has reached the second-order demon emperor realm. Second-order demon emperor realm. It seems that the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy are much stronger than before. It seems that this disciple is going to win. The First Academy is going to lose miserably this time. At this moment, the crowd was looking at the disciple in the arena and discussing. The disciple in the arena seemed to be enjoying the attention of the crowd. At this moment, he even felt a little light in his heart. Dean Yi, this disciple is indeed the 10th outer disciple. I believe that the strength of your disciple should not be weak. It seems that you've won this round. The dean suddenly looked at Yi Hao and said. Hearing the dean's words, the crowd naturally understood what he meant. Of course, he was mocking Yi Hao. What he meant was that the Tianyuan Academy had sent out the weakest disciple. It was obvious that he was going easy on Yi Hao. If Yi Hao could not win, it would be embarrassing. Thank you for letting me win, Yi Hao replied with a smile. His tone was full of confidence. The confidence in Yi Hao's tone made the dean frown. He thought to himself, could it be that the disciple sent out is really stronger than the second-order demon emperor realm? Otherwise, how could he be so confident? This was not what he wanted to see. He wanted to see the first academy fail to win a single match, so that he could humiliate Yi Hao harshly. Looks like we've miscalculated this time. The Tianyuan Academy's principal's expression turned ugly. In his opinion, Wang Kai must be one of the most powerful outer disciples of the First Academy. However, he didn't give up completely. He still had a trace of hope for his disciple. In Huang Xiaolong's opinion, a second-order Devil Emperor disciple's strength was already considered pretty good. Based on the First Academy's strength, it was almost impossible for them to have a second-order Devil Emperor disciple. Since you want to die, then don't blame me. Besides, your mouth is too smelly. Wang Kai snorted coldly and directly jumped onto the stage. Cold Moon Beheader. The disciples of the Tianyuan Academy knew that Wang Kai's strength might not be as simple as they had imagined. Therefore, he took the initiative to use a martial skill to attack. And when Wang Kai saw the attacking disciples, his reaction was abnormally fast. After all, he had experienced life and death in a magical beast forest and was filled with battle experience. A disciple's sudden attack was nothing to him. The two immediately collided. Wang Kai took 3 steps back, but the Tianyuan Academy disciple only took 1 step back. I told you that the Tianyuan Academy disciple is more powerful. That's right. Look, the Tianyuan Academy disciple only took 1 step back, but the First Academy disciple took 3 steps back. I don't think so. Didn't you see that the Tianyuan Academy disciple used a martial skill, but the First Academy disciple didn't? Could it be that the First Academy disciple is more powerful? That's hard to say. Who knows if the Tianyuan Academy disciple has more powerful martial skills? Or maybe the First Academy disciple doesn't have more powerful martial skills. That's right. Although cultivation is important, martial skills are also very important. When the crowd saw that Wang Kai and the Tianyuan Academy disciple were fighting, they immediately started to discuss. On the other hand, the Tianyuan Academy disciple was shocked. He had not expected that Wang Kai would be able to block his sudden attack. Most importantly, he had used a martial skill, but Wang Kai had not done anything to him. The martial skill that he had used was a top-grade demon yellow martial skill. Furthermore, he had already practiced it to the point of perfection. The strength of the attack was comparable to a dark demon yellow martial skill. However, Wang Kai had not used a martial skill, and he could not do anything to Wang Kai. He knew that he was not as powerful as Wang Kai. Ice Piercer. The Tianyuan Academy disciple squinted his eyes and snorted. He immediately attacked Wang Kai again. It is a dark demon yellow martial skill. The Tianyuan Academy is indeed resourceful. When the crowd saw the Tianyuan Academy disciple use a martial skill, they could not help but exclaim. When the dean and elders of the Tianyuan Academy saw this, they nodded their heads. In their opinion, it was the wisest choice for the disciple to use his strongest martial skill at this moment. Not bad. He has actually practiced his martial skill to the proficient level. It is comparable to a dark demon yellow martial skill. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy looked at the Tianyuan Academy disciple's martial skill and said, "Did you see that? The First Academy disciple is not panicking at all." At that moment, when everyone was amazed by the martial skill that the Tianyuan Academy disciple had used, someone suddenly spoke up. Whirlwind slash. Just as everyone was looking at Wang Kai suddenly roared out, "What is also a dark demon yellow martial skill?" When the crowd saw Wang Kai use his martial skill, they could not help but exclaim. Looking at the power of his martial skill, it is at least at the proficient level. I did not expect the First Academy to have a dark demon yellow martial skill. It seems like the First Academy came prepared. They are not as weak as the rumors say. Just when the crowd was discussing, Wang Kai and the Tianyuan Academy disciple had already started fighting. The crowd could not help but open their eyes wide. They wanted to see clearly who was stronger between the two of them. Suddenly, a scream was heard. Everyone could tell that the scream came from the Tianyuan Academy disciple. Right after the scream was heard, the Heavenly Yuan Academy's disciple was sent flying and smashed into the ground below the stage. There were many wounds on the disciple's body. The most serious one was the disciple's right arm. It had almost been cut off. At that moment, Wang Kai was still standing on the arena with a long sword in his hand. There were no wounds on his body. Chapter 8:18. Who is the trash? Wang Kai pointed his sword at the disciple below the ring. Although the disciple below the ring looked indignant, the wounds all over his body prevented him from saying a word. "Thank you for letting the First Academy win this round," Yi Hao said with a smile as he looked at the Tianyuan Academy's dean, who was beside him. When the dean of the Tianyuan Academy heard Yi Hao's words, his expression turned even uglier. He had not expected that the Tianyuan Academy would lose the first round of the challenge. Moreover, they had lost so decisively. Although he had thought that Wang Kai might be strong since he was the first disciple that Yi Hao had sent out, he had not expected Wang Kai to be able to crush the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy. "Humph, I don't believe that you have more powerful disciples." The dean of the Tianyuan Academy suddenly snorted coldly. In his opinion, Wang Kai was probably the only disciple that Yi Hao could send out from the outer yard. "Dean Yi, please continue to send out people to challenge. I hope that the First Academy can still win," the dean of the Tianyuan Academy said. "Since it is a challenge, let's not waste any more time," Yi Hao said with a yawn. "What do you mean?" The dean of the Tianyuan Academy did not understand Yi Hao's meaning and looked at Yi Hao in confusion. "What I mean is that I will send out 9 disciples to challenge the remaining 9 disciples of the outer yard of the Tianyuan Academy." When the crowd heard Yi Hao's words, they were shocked. They're going to challenge all of them. Could it be that the First Academy has run out of powerful people and they're going to give up? I think so. After all, the First Academy has only been established for a few months. How could they have so many powerful disciples? If the First Academy can defeat the Tianyuan Academy in just a few months, that would be terrifying. All right, since Dean you want to challenge them, I have no objections. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy finally smiled when he heard Yi Hao's words. In his opinion, Yi Hao was rather tactful. He knew that he was going to lose, so he did not want to waste any more time after winning one round. After all, it would be too embarrassing if he lost all 9 rounds in a row. Therefore, he might as well finish in one go. Anyway, they had already finished one round and won. With the standard of the First Academy, even if they lost all the rounds, it would not be too embarrassing. If he were Yi Hao, he would probably do the same thing as Yi Hao. With such thoughts in mind, the displeasure that the principal of the Tianyuan Academy felt from losing the first round vanished without a trace. At this moment, the elders of the Heavenly Yuan Academy were all smiling. Clearly, they had the same thoughts as the dean. "The 9 of you can go," Yi Hao said to the 9 outer yard disciples behind him. "Yes." Upon hearing Yi Hao's order, the 9 outer yard disciples immediately jumped into the arena. Yi Hao was full of confidence in these 9 disciples. At that moment, the many family heads all had worried expressions on their faces. Their thoughts were practically the same as the Heavenly Yuan Academy's headmaster. "Tell me, is the Lord really going to go all out? Looks like it's more or less the same. Sigh, I was still hoping for a miracle. Now it seems impossible." The weakest outer yard disciples of the Tianyuan Academy are at least level 2 demon emperors. The remaining 9 disciples are at least level 3 demon emperors. Hearing the discussion of the family heads, the demon sovereign smiled without saying a word. Only they knew what kind of drastic changes had happened to these disciples in the 3 months that they had been following Yi Hao. Junior brothers of the Tianyuan Academy, where are you? Suddenly, one of the 9 people in the arena shouted, "Here!" The other 8 people responded immediately. Their aura was so imposing that it made one's heart tremble. "Come with me to teach the bunch of ignorant trash from the First Academy a lesson." Okay, the 9 disciples of the Tianyuan Academy shouted in unison. Then, they used their strongest martial skills to defeat the disciples of the First Academy in the shortest time possible. However, the disciples of the First Academy were not to be trifled with. One by one, they rushed up to meet the challenge. In an instant, the 9 people in the arena were intertwined, and it was a dazzling sight to behold. The entire area quietened down, and no one talked about it anymore. Only the sound of weapons clashing and the shouting of the disciples could be heard. It seems like the First Academy is not that weak after all. That's right. By right, the First Academy should have been defeated. However, it seems like they are evenly matched. However, the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy are indeed powerful. They have reached level 4 Demon Emperor. Didn't you see that the disciples of the First Academy are not weaker than level 4 Demon Emperors? Could it be that the rumors are false? The First Academy is not that weak. At this moment, the onlookers looked at the 18 people who were fighting on the 9 arenas. They were evenly matched. The scene of the disciples of the First Academy being defeated as they had imagined did not happen. At this moment, the onlookers were shocked. "Dean, how could this be? It seems like the disciples of the First Academy are not weak." "That's right. I saw a few of our disciples giving it their all." Could it be that the First Academy is really hiding their strength? When the elders of the Tianyuan Academy saw this scene, they started to panic. At this moment, the smile on the Tianyuan Academy's dean's face had long disappeared. He frowned and said, "Impossible. The First Academy has just been established. How is it possible that they have so many talented disciples? It's impossible." The dean of the Tianyuan Academy refused to believe what he was seeing. After all, the Tianyuan Academy had a strong foundation, and the disciples they recruited were talented. It was reasonable for them to be strong. Moreover, he had spent a large amount of resources to let his disciples soak in a medicinal bath for 3 months. In his opinion, the First Academy should not have been defeated. However, although there was no clear winner, he could not accept the fact that they were evenly matched. After all, he had looked down on the First Academy and was full of disdain. After all, the First Academy had just been established. Even if they recruited some talented disciples, they could not be compared to the disciples that the Tianyuan Academy had carefully nurtured. Moreover, he had sent someone to investigate and found out that the disciples recruited by the First Academy did not have any talent requirements. Moreover, they were all disciples with poor qualifications. However, there were so many disciples who were as talented as the Tianyuan Academy. How could he accept this? Chapter 819. What do you mean? When the crowd heard Yi Hao's strange words, they turned to look at Yi Hao. Bam! Just as the crowd was looking at Yi Hao's expression changed. Suddenly, a disciple flew out of one of the arenas. When the crowd saw the disciple flying out, they turned to look at the arenas again. There was only one disciple left in one of the arenas. At the edge of the arena, another disciple was lying on the ground, struggling in pain. Everyone was stunned because no one was able to react in time. What on earth had happened? The disciple of the First Academy was standing, and the disciple of Tianyuan Academy was lying on the ground. What happened? Weren't they evenly matched just now? How did the battle end so quickly? Just as the crowd was still in shock, 2 figures flew out of 2 more arenas. Bam! Bam! 2 more disciples of Tianyuan Academy landed on the edge of the arena. The winner was still the disciple of the First Academy. How is this possible? Doesn't this mean that the First Academy has won 4 rounds? When the crowd saw this, they swallowed their saliva. However, the shock did not end there. In the blink of an eye, 2 more disciples of Tianyuan Academy flew out. The first academy has won 6 rounds. Someone said in shock. Bam, 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 bam. At this moment, the outcome of the battles in the other arenas had also been decided. In the end, all the disciples of Tianyuan Academy were defeated. Tianyuan Academy had been completely defeated. The crowd could not believe what they had just seen. They had expected the first academy to be defeated. But now, the first academy had won 10 rounds in a row. In other words, the outer disciples of Tianyuan Academy had lost to the outer disciples of the first academy. However, many people simply couldn't react in time because all of this happened too quickly. They were still in shock that the first academy was evenly matched with the disciples of Tianyuan Academy. But in the next second, the first academy had defeated all the disciples of Tianyuan Academy. The first academy has hidden their strength well. I didn't expect Tianyuan Academy to be so weak in front of the first academy. The first academy is too surprising. No matter what, the first academy has won 10 rounds. They are invincible. Now I can't help but look forward to seeing how powerful the inner disciples of the first academy are. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but look at Yi Hao. But when the crowd saw that Yi Hao was the principal of the first academy at such a young age, they were even more shocked. After all, Yi Hao's first academy had proven with their abilities that the first academy was not as weak as the rumors said. The first academy's outer sect could crush the Tianyuan Academy's outer sect. Hence, everyone had no choice but to pay attention to the first academy. We actually won. This can't be real, right? How can these disciples be so strong? What have they experienced in the past 3 months with the Lord? Who would dare to say that the first academy is not as good as Tianyuan Academy in the future? The Tianyuan Academy is nothing. The Tianyuan Academy was defeated by the first academy. At this moment, all of the family heads were beaming with smiles. They didn't even dare to think that the first academy could win, let alone defeat the Tianyuan Academy. After all, these outer sect disciples were selected by Yi Hao from their families. They were very clear about the abilities of these disciples. Compared to now, it was a world of difference. The family heads looked at the demon reverends of their families and realized that the demon reverends didn't have much of an expression on their faces. They knew that they were worried for nothing. Compared to the Tianyuan Academy, the people of the Tianyuan Academy looked extremely upset. How can this be? How did the people of the first academy become so powerful all of a sudden? Principal, I suspect that the disciples of the first academy might have taken some special elixir. Principal, I also suspect that if they didn't take any special elixir, how could they defeat the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy? At this moment, the elders of the Tianyuan Academy started to voice their doubts. This was because they couldn't accept that the Tianyuan Academy was defeated by the first academy. After all, if this matter were spread, the reputation of the Tianyuan Academy would be ruined. After all, the Tianyuan Academy was defeated by an academy that had just been established for a few months. This was something that would make people laugh their heads off. Your Highness, I also suspect that there is something wrong with the disciples of the first academy. Hearing the words of the elders, the Tianyuan Academy's principal cupped his fists and said to the princess with a gloomy face, "What? Could it be that the disciples of the first academy really took some special elixir? I knew it. How could the disciples of the first academy defeat the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy? Sigh, the first academy is indeed despicable. They actually used some special elixir." When the crowd heard the words of the Tianyuan Academy's principal and the elders, they couldn't help but feel suspicious. After all, as martial artists, they knew that there were many elixirs that could greatly increase one's cultivation in a short period of time. However, if the first academy used some special elixir to increase their cultivation in a short period of time during the competition, it was too despicable. Tianyuan Academy, don't slander us. That's right. Since when did you learn to accuse others because you can't afford to lose? We didn't use any special elixir to increase our cultivation in a short period of time. This is our true strength. We would never do such a despicable thing. At this moment, The disciples standing in the arena were furious. They had not expected to be accused by the Tianyuan Academy, even though they had won the competition. After all, this wasn't just questioning their strength. It was also an insult to their character. At this moment, Yi Hao's face turned cold. He had not expected the Tianyuan Academy to be such a sore loser. They had lost, and they still wanted to accuse others. Why is this the way the Tianyuan Academy does things? After losing, you still want to accuse others. You are weak, and you still doubt others' strength? Yi Hao narrowed his eyes and looked at the Tianyuan Academy's principal. I'm only suspecting. I did not accuse anyone. Could it be that Principal Yi has a guilty conscience? The Tianyuan Academy's principal snorted coldly. To be honest, the Tianyuan Academy's principal also suspected that the disciples of the First Academy had taken some special elixir. This was because the more he thought about it, the more he felt that the disciples of the First Academy shouldn't be so powerful. It was impossible for them to defeat the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy. Chapter 820. Doesn't the First Academy have the testing stone? Just take it out. The princess continued. Yes. Hearing the princess's instructions, the Tianyuan Academy president agreed immediately. He then instructed the elders, hurry up and take out the testing stone. After receiving the president's instructions, the elders immediately left the place and went to the testing stone. The testing stone would show the true strength of the martial artist. If the martial artist had relied on elixir pills to temporarily raise his cultivation level, he would be able to tell with one test. Whether the First Academy is cheating or not, we will know in a while. The Tianyuan Academy president said with a smug smile. In his opinion, he firmly believed that the disciples of the First Academy must have used elixir pills. This was because he believed that the disciples of the First Academy could not be more powerful than the disciples of Tianyuan Academy. President Yi, if you admit it now, it is too late. Don't embarrass yourself later. The Tianyuan Academy president continued to look at Yi Hao. Yi Hao glanced at the Tianyuan Academy president with disdain. He did not care. After all, the strength of the disciples was definitely real. There was nothing fake about it. So what if they took it out as a testing stone? Let's see what you could do later. The Tianyuan Academy president snorted. In his opinion, Yi Hao was just putting up a strong front. As long as he took out the testing stone, he would definitely be exposed. It didn't take long for several elders to return with a massive jade stone. This jade stone was about the size of a person, and there were 10 stars carved on it. This is the Demon Emperor rank testing stone. Each star represents a small rank. The Tianyuan Academy president introduced the stone. As long as you infuse your energy into it, the stars will emit red light. Each star that lights up represents a rank. After the Tianyuan Academy president finished speaking, he looked at Yi Hao with a smile. President Yi, the testing stone is here. Let your disciple take it. Wait a minute. There is no hurry. Yi Hao smiled. President, you are doubting my disciple. However, if my disciple takes the testing stone and finds out that his strength is real, won't you apologize to my disciple? All right, if you really have the strength, what's wrong with me apologizing? The Tianyuan Academy's headmaster said confidently, because in his opinion, the more Yi Hao made things difficult for him by not letting his disciple take the test, the more it meant that Yi Hao was hiding something. Since Tianyuan Academy is such a sore loser, let's prove it to them and make them accept their defeat wholeheartedly. Yi Hao looked at the confident expression of the Tianyuan Academy's principal. He sneered in his heart and immediately said to the disciples, Let me go first. Wang Kai was the weakest among them, so he took the initiative to speak. Yi Hao nodded when he saw Wang Kai step forward. He didn't say anything. The crowd immediately shifted their gazes to Wang Kai's identity. Wang Kai walked up to the testing stone, looked around, and confidently sent his energy into the testing stone. It's lit up, it's lit up. Everyone looked at the testing stone. When it lit up with a red light, they immediately focused their attention on the testing stone. As for the people from the Heavenly Yuan Academy, they all turned their gazes to the testing stone. After all, whether Wang Kai's strength was real or not was related to the reputation of Tianyuan Academy. They couldn't wait for Wang Kai's strength to be fake. However, the result was destined to disappoint them. 3 stars lit up on the testing stone, which proved that Wang Kai's strength was at the 3rd Order Demon Emperor. It's real. Moreover, he's at the 3rd Order Demon Emperor. Didn't you see how deep the red light emitted by the stars is? You should know that the deeper the light, the purer the energy. Look at how bright the 3 stars are. This person is definitely at the peak of the 3rd Order Demon Emperor. I guess he won't be able to find a match for him in the same realm. Everyone looked at Wang Kai and the testing stone and started to discuss. However, Wang Kai withdrew his hand. Are you still going to say that there's something wrong with the testing stone? Yi Hao looked at the Tianyuan Academy's principal and said with a smile, "Oomph." The Tianyuan Academy's principal snorted coldly. His expression was very ugly. After all, the testing stone was provided by them. Moreover, it was impossible for the testing stone to be wrong. If they were to say that there was something wrong with the testing stone at this moment, it would be a real joke. Just because there's nothing wrong with one doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with the rest. An elder of the Tianyuan Academy stood out immediately and said, "Some people just like the feeling of being slapped in the face." Yi Hao shook his head and said with a smile when he heard the elder's words. As Yi Hao signaled with his eyes, a disciple stood out immediately. He walked to the testing stone and injected his energy into it. 3 stars, another 3rd Order Demon Emperor. However, this disciple's energy is stronger and purer than the previous one. Everyone looked at the disciple and started to discuss. At this moment, the faces of the people of the Tianyuan Academy were even uglier. "I don't believe it," an elder said with a ferocious expression. "Continue the test." 4 stars. The 3rd disciple stepped forward and started the test. 4 stars lit up on the testing stone immediately. "How is it? Do you still want to test?" Yi Hao looked at the people of the Tianyuan Academy and asked with a smile. "Continue." The dean of the Tianyuan Academy did not say anything. Instead, it was an elder who said in a deep voice. The 4th disciple stepped forward and tested. 4 stars were also displayed on the testing stone. The 5th, 6th, and 7th disciples went up to test one after another. All of them were 4th Order Demon Emperors. At this point, the onlookers were so shocked that they were speechless. Now that the testing stone was here, it proved that the strength of the disciples of the First Academy was real. They could not doubt it, even if they wanted to. How could this be? The dean of the Tianyuan Academy's heart sank. 7 disciples had been tested, although there were still 3 disciples who had not been tested. However, it could be seen that the disciples of the First Academy did not use any special elixir or fake the results. The strength that they had displayed was their true strength. However, he was still unwilling to accept it. This was because he was unwilling to admit that the genius that he had painstakingly nurtured could not catch up with the disciples of the First Academy that he had looked down on. When he knew that the remaining 3 disciples of the First Academy had completed the test, he gave up completely. On the contrary, the onlookers were so shocked that they were speechless. This was because the strength of the disciples of the First Academy had shocked them too much. Was this still the rumored First Academy that was trashy? If the academy with so many talented disciples was trashy, what was the Tianyuan Academy? Chapter 821. What? You really want me to apologize? Upon hearing Yi Hao's words, the Tianyuan Academy's dean's voice was filled with disbelief. After all, he was the dean of the Tianyuan Academy. In the Tianyuan Kingdom, he was a top-notch existence. He had both prestige and prestige. Now, he was actually asked to apologize to a disciple from another academy. Furthermore, it was in front of so many people. He really couldn't do it. What? Could it be that the dean of the Tianyuan Academy is someone who goes back on his word? Yi Hao didn't give him any face as he questioned him directly. When Yi Hao spoke, he deliberately used his power. Hence, everyone could hear Yi Hao's words. In an instant, everyone's gaze fell on the dean of the Tianyuan Academy. Seeing the gazes from all around him, The dean of the Tianyuan Academy looked at Yi Hao gloomily. Kid, don't go too far. If you go too far, it won't do you any good. Where possible, you should be lenient. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy's eyes were filled with murderous intent. The threat was self-evident. Ha ha! Upon hearing the dean's words, Yi Hao immediately laughed. Who is the one who is going too far? He kept forcing us to take the test. Now that the results are out, he actually wants to deny it. Yi Hao said coldly as he looked at the dean of the Tianyuan Academy. What's going on? Is the dean of the Tianyuan Academy trying to deny it? With such character, going back on his word isn't that great. Could it be that the higher one's status is, the more they don't keep their word? When the crowd heard the conversation between Yi Hao and the dean of the Tianyuan Academy, they immediately started discussing unhappily. When Yi Hao heard the crowd's words, he looked at the dean of the Tianyuan Academy and sneered in his heart. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy frowned. He knew that he had to give everyone an explanation at this moment. If word got out that he didn't keep his word, the impact on himself and the Tianyuan Academy would be huge. I shouldn't have doubted you. I apologize. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy said in a deep voice. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. If he could, he would immediately kill Yi Hao and arrest. This was because he felt that this was the greatest humiliation of his life. And all of this was thanks to Yi Hao. He would not be satisfied if he did not kill Yi Hao. However, there were too many people here, and there were all sorts of people from different forces. Therefore, he could not make a move here. Even though he felt like his chest was about to explode, he still forcefully suppressed his anger. Bastard, I won't forgive you. At this moment, Chu Feng, who was standing in the arena, glared at Yi Hao viciously. After all, he was a disciple of the Tianyuan Academy. The reputation of the Tianyuan Academy was his reputation. At this moment, the dean of Tianyuan Academy was being forced to apologize to the first Academy's disciple in front of everyone. This was an absolute humiliation. So at this moment, his hatred for Yi Hao had reached its peak. He was not the only one. Everyone from the Tianyuan Academy felt as though they had lost all face. All of them were glaring at Yi Hao furiously. If they could, they would be the first to rush up and kill Yi Hao. Since our disciples have taken the test, shouldn't your Tianyuan Academy's disciples take the test too? Yi Hao did not care about the anger of the Tianyuan Academy's disciples at all. Instead, he spoke up. What do you mean? Upon hearing Yi Hao's words, the dean of Tianyuan Academy was furious. Don't tell me you suspect that my Tianyuan Academy's disciples would do such a despicable thing. I don't know about that. However, it's fair. You all should take the test too. At most, I will apologize to your disciples. Yi Hao said nonchalantly. However, he knew very well that during the battle just now, a few of the Tianyuan Academy's disciples had secretly eaten elixirs. Although the actions of those disciples were very subtle and could not be detected by others, they could not hide from him. This was because when the disciples were fighting, he clearly saw the throats of a few of the Tianyuan Academy's disciples move slightly. Then, their strength increased slightly. Yi Hao guessed that the Tianyuan Academy's disciples had probably hidden the elixirs in their mouths in advance. Furthermore, Yi Hao realized that when he said that he wanted to test the Tianyuan Academy's disciples, the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy's disciples had all been stunned. Among the 10 disciples who had been defeated, several of them had panicked expressions on their faces. Kid, don't go overboard. The dean of Tianyuan Academy said gloomily as he glared at Yi Hao. Actually, he did not know that his disciples had eaten elixirs. He only thought that Yi Hao wanted to test the strength of the Tianyuan Academy's disciples after watching the first Academy's disciples take the test. He wanted to use the gap between the two academies to humiliate the Tianyuan Academy. After all, after passing the test, he had to admit that Yi Hao's first Academy's disciples were generally stronger than the Tianyuan Academy's disciples. What's wrong? Could it be that the Tianyuan Academy has a guilty conscience? After all this time, the thief is calling the police. One of the family heads behind Yi Hao suddenly said, You must be tired of living. What are you talking about? The Tianyuan Academy's elder said angrily when he heard the demon venerate's words. However, the onlookers immediately started to gossip and point at the Tianyuan Academy. Since they want to test, let's do it. If the Tianyuan Academy doesn't do this, what's there to be afraid of? It's good to prove it. Just as the Tianyuan Academy and the First Academy were about to draw their swords, the princess' sweet voice was heard from the palanquin again. Yes, your highness. The Tianyuan Academy's dean looked at the palanquin with a hint of displeasure in his eyes. However, he quickly hid it. However, deep down, he believed that his disciples had not consumed any special elixirs. When he thought about how Yi Hao would apologize to his disciples in front of everyone if his disciples had not consumed any special elixirs, the Tianyuan Academy's dean felt relieved. "Dean, you can't do this," an elder said anxiously the moment the Tianyuan Academy's dean agreed. This was because he was the one who had given the Tianyuan Academy's disciples the elixirs. He had only done this as a precaution. After all, no one would find out in the end. However, he had never expected that the Tianyuan Academy's disciples would still be tested on the testing stone after they had already been defeated. We didn't do this. What's there to be afraid of? The Tianyuan Academy's dean didn't care about the elder's objection. All he wanted now was for Yi Hao to apologize to his disciples. As long as Yi Hao apologized to his disciples, the dean would at least be able to salvage some of his dignity. Do you guys think that the Tianyuan Academy's disciples have consumed any special elixirs? I don't think so. After all, the Tianyuan Academy was suspicious of the First Academy from the start. If they had already done this, how could they still dare to suspect the First Academy? That's hard to say. What if the Tianyuan Academy is really acting like a thief? Chapter 822. The few of you take the test and prove the innocence of Tianyuan Academy. The principal of Tianyuan Academy said to the disciples. Hearing the principal's words, a few disciples stepped forward and began to test their strength. Although the disciples' strength was not as good as the First Academy's, it was true that they were not mistaken. How is it? What else do you have to say? After testing 4 or 5 people, the principal of Tianyuan Academy said proudly, "I knew it. Tianyuan Academy is so reputable that they would never do such a thing. The First Academy is so superfluous. Looks like the principal of the First Academy will have to apologize to the disciples of Tianyuan Academy. We are even now." Many of the onlookers who thought highly of Tianyuan Academy said. The disciples of Tianyuan Academy were even more displeased. The First Academy still wants to accuse us. Great, just wait for them to apologize to us. Well, we have won back some face this time. I'm still looking forward to the principal of the First Academy apologizing to us. Principal Yi, I think you should apologize. The principal of Tianyuan Academy said proudly. Don't be hasty. Isn't this person not done with the test yet? Yi Hao said as he pointed to the remaining 4 or 5 people. All right, Yi Hao, I will make you admit defeat today. Hearing Yi Hao's words, the principal of Tianyuan Academy said disdainfully. The few of you, stop wasting time. Continue with the test. The principal of Tianyuan Academy said impatiently as he looked at the remaining disciples. The remaining disciples felt guilty when they heard the principal's words. However, they did not dare to explain themselves. What are you waiting for? The principal of Tianyuan Academy said unhappily when he saw the disciples dilly-dallying. The disciples were afraid that the principal of Tianyuan Academy would fly into a rage. They gritted their teeth and walked to the testing stone. One of the disciples placed his hand on the testing stone with trembling hands. However, he did not dare to inject any energy into the stone. Seeing the disciple dilly-dallying, the principal of Tianyuan Academy looked at him unhappily. The disciple felt the principal's gaze, and he broke out in a cold sweat. He closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and injected his energy into the testing stone. For the testing stones lit up. What do you think? Looking at the test stone that lit up, the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster looked at the crowd. He wanted to prove that his disciple's strength was absolutely real. At this moment, everyone looked at the testing stone, and an uproar broke out. This Tianyuan Academy is actually cheating, using such despicable and shameless means. You're the one who faked it, yet you still want to accuse me. Sigh, this Tianyuan Academy really disappoints me. It's one thing to cheat, but you actually lost. That's the most ridiculous thing. If it wasn't for the test, we might still be in the dark. Never would I have imagined that the Heavenly Yuan Academy would be reduced to such a state. When the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster heard the discussions coming from the surroundings, as well as the disdainful gazes, he immediately looked towards the testing stone. Out of the 4 stars that lit up at the beginning, one of them was extremely dim and yellow. This proved that this disciple's real strength was still in level 3 Demon Emperor. The extra realm was raised by this disciple with the help of some special pills. How could this be? Who asked you to do this? Seeing this scene, the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster could no longer suppress the anger in his heart and shouted out loudly. At this moment, the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster felt nothing. He could only feel a burning pain on his face. After all, he had doubted the first academy in front of so many people at the beginning. In the end, the first academy was fine, but his academy was in trouble. Moreover, he had said confidently that there was nothing wrong with his disciple. At this moment, he felt that everyone was looking at him with ridicule and disdain. The stars on the testing stone stung his eyes even more. Plop! Seeing that the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster was angry, the disciple's face turned pale and he fell to his knees with a plop. Headmaster, please punish me. This is a mistake on my part. I know that I was wrong. The disciple did not dare to betray the elder at this moment, so he could only kowtow and admit his mistake. You're courting death. The Tianyuan Academy's headmaster looked at the disciple with murderous intent in his eyes. At this moment, he really wanted to kill this disciple with a slap. Because of this disciple, Tianyuan Academy's reputation would be completely ruined at this moment. There was no need to look at anything else. Just by looking at the looks of disdain on the faces of the crowd, one could tell how important Tianyuan Academy was to them. If this matter were to spread out, the consequences would be even more serious. Headmaster, what is going on? I need an explanation. How could something like this happen in Tianyuan Academy? At this moment, the princess's voice rang out. Your Highness, I really did not know about this matter. This dog acted on his own accord. It has nothing to do with Tianyuan Academy. The Tianyuan Academy's headmaster explained immediately. Of course, he was not only explaining to the princess, but to everyone present. Haha, I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect that Tianyuan Academy would act like a thief crying thief. Seeing the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster's expression, Yi laughed. Naturally, he would not let go of the opportunity to put down Tianyuan Academy. He immediately laughed and said, Headmaster, we used to hear about how good Tianyuan Academy was. Now it seems like this is all there is to it. That's right. I didn't expect that you would use elixirs to make up for your lack of strength. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you are the one who did it, but you still want to accuse others. Hearing Yihao's words, the many disciples behind him immediately stepped forward to add salt to the wound. You, puff. When the Tianyuan Academy's headmaster heard what Yihao and the First Academy's disciples said, he was instantly enraged. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Headmaster, are you all right? Seeing the headmaster spit out blood, the Tianyuan Academy's elders immediately went to support him anxiously. You bunch of disappointing things. The Tianyuan Academy's headmaster glanced at the outer sect disciples and scolded them angrily. The outer sect disciples of Tianyuan Academy immediately lowered their heads, especially those who had taken the elixirs. In fact, even they did not expect to be tested. Chapter 823. This was because even if they lost, they would at most be considered weaker than the First Academy. However, now that they were found to have cheated, it was a matter of character. This was a disgrace to their reputation. This was simply lifting a rock and smashing it on his own feet. If they had not requested to test the disciples of the First Academy, this problem would not have happened. However, he did not expect his disciples to cheat by taking elixirs behind his back. Moreover, he was kept in the dark, causing him to lose face in front of so many people. Headmaster, could it be that this is how our Imperial Academy teaches its disciples? At that moment, the princess in the palanquin suddenly opened her mouth and questioned. Everyone was shocked when they heard the princess's question. What is going on? The princess of the Tianyuan Kingdom is reprimanding the dean of the Tianyuan Academy in public. The dean of the Tianyuan Academy frowned when he heard the princess's question. Although this matter was indeed the fault of the Tianyuan Academy, the princess did not have to give him face and reprimand him in public. Where is he supposed to put his face now? Even Yihao was dumbfounded. He did not expect the princess to reprimand the dean of the Tianyuan Academy. One should know that the dean of the Tianyuan Academy and the princess were on the same side. Why would the princess reprimand the dean of the Tianyuan Academy? There must be something going on. Yihao thought to himself as he looked at the sedan. That's enough. Dean, you don't have to be angry over this group of trash. At this moment, Chu Feng stepped out and said, What does Chu Feng mean? Hearing Chu Feng's words, the 10 disciples of the Tianyuan Academy were immediately displeased. After all, although they had lost, Chu Feng could not call them trash in front of so many people. Of course, the disciples did not dare to say anything as they were afraid of Chu Feng's strength. Isn't the First Academy powerful? Today, I, Chu Feng, will challenge all the disciples of the First Academy. Chu Feng looked at the 20 disciples of the First Academy and said arrogantly, What? Is this Chu Feng crazy? Does he want to challenge all 20 of them alone? Didn't he see the strength of the outer yard disciples of the First Academy? That's right. The outer yard disciples of the First Academy are already so powerful. I guess the inner yard disciples won't be any weaker. Chu Feng deserves to be called the #1 genius of Tianyuan Academy. His behavior is indeed arrogant. Hearing Chu Feng's words, the elders of the Tianyuan Academy were overjoyed. This was because if Chu Feng were to attack and defeat all the disciples of the First Academy, Tianyuan Academy would definitely regain all the face they had lost today. At this moment, the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy, who had been dejected because their academy had lost the competition, were now looking at Chu Feng with admiration. Seeing your brother Chu Feng is still so handsome. Brother Chu Feng is really too awesome. He actually wants to challenge the First Academy alone. I can't take it anymore. I simply worship senior brother Chu too much. The disciples of the Tianyuan Academy exclaimed excitedly. Chu Feng, are you confident? Hearing Chu Feng's words, the headmaster of the Tianyuan Academy directly asked. Headmaster, don't worry. Against a bunch of trash, it's still a piece of cake for me. Chu Feng looked at the 20 disciples of the First Academy with disdain. This brat is crazy. He actually wants to challenge all of us. No, I feel like beating him up when I see how he's asking for a beating. This brat still thinks he's the Lord. Does he have the strength of the Lord? He still wants to challenge all of us. What a joke. When the disciples behind Yihao heard Chu Feng's words, they couldn't help but laugh coldly. However, they didn't care at all. How about it? Headmaster Yi, do you dare to accept the challenge? The headmaster of the Tianyuan Academy looked at Yihao provocatively. If you have the guts, accept my challenge. Chu Feng said directly as soon as the headmaster of the Tianyuan Academy finished his words. I'm just afraid that when someone loses, they'll say that the First Academy is bullying us with numbers. Yihao looked at the two of them and laughed. Cut the crap. I'm just asking if you dare to accept the challenge. Hearing Yihao's words, Chu Feng squinted his eyes and continued to question him. Since you're courting death, how can I not fulfill your wish? Yihao said with a smile. Then let's begin. Chu Feng turned around and couldn't wait to jump into the arena. Pay attention to your cooperation. I'm afraid this guy's strength has broken through the Demon Venerable realm. I'm afraid he's a level 1 Demon Venerable. Seeing Chu Feng jump into the arena, Yihao whispered to the disciples. Because the strength of the disciples was indeed much weaker than Chu Feng's strength. Among the remaining disciples, only 2 of the inner disciples had reached the peak of the Demon Emperor realm. 3 of them were level 9 Demon Emperors, while the remaining 3 were level 8 Demon Emperors and 2 were level 7 Demon Emperors. As for the strength of the outer disciples, needless to say, they definitely wouldn't be at an advantage against a Demon Venerable. Even the 2 peak Archdevil Emperors would have a hard time dealing with a First-Order Archdevil Venerable. After all, although it was only a step away, the gap between them was like heaven and earth. The only thing worth mentioning was the combat experience of the disciples and the tacit cooperation among them, which had been trained over the past few months. Therefore, with so many disciples joining forces, it was very possible for them to defeat Chu Feng. Trash, come up quickly. I want you to know that Tianyuan Academy is inviolable. The First Academy is only qualified to submit to Tianyuan Academy. Chu Feng stood in the arena and shouted, "Kill!" The disciples of the First Academy had been provoked by Chu Feng time and time again. At the same time, they had been looked down upon by Chu Feng. Even at this moment, the disciples were full of anger. All the disciples roared in unison. They looked at each other and attacked Chu Feng from all sides. "Come on, a bunch of trash. I'll show you what strength is." At this moment, Chu Feng looked at the disciples who were charging at him and revealed a smug smile. He also released the aura of a level 1 Demon Venerable. He wanted to use his realm to suppress the disciples of the First Academy. I didn't expect Senior Brother Chu Feng to have broken through and reached level 1 Demon Venerable. Senior Brother Chu Feng is indeed the #1 genius of the Tianyuan Academy. Senior Brother Chu Feng has reached level 1 Demon Venerable at such a young age. His future is limitless. No wonder Senior Brother Chu Feng dares to challenge all the disciples of the First Academy. It turns out that he has broken through to level 1 Demon Venerable. With Senior Brother Chu Feng's strength, it seems that we will win this time. At this moment, the disciples of the Tianyuan Academy were shocked by Chu Feng's strength. At the same time, their faces were filled with admiration. Chapter 824. Chu Feng is indeed a genius disciple of Tianyuan Academy. I didn't expect Chu Feng to reach the Demon Venerable realm. His talent is really powerful. At this moment, the onlookers gasped when they saw Chu Feng's realm aura. Haha, Chu Feng really broke through. He really didn't let me down. At this moment, the Dean of Tianyuan Academy was stunned when he saw Chu Feng's strength. Then, he smiled with satisfaction. Even the elders behind him were shocked. Then, their faces were filled with ecstasy. Although Chu Feng had also experienced the medicinal bath for 3 months, it was easier said than done to break through to the Demon Venerable realm as a peak Demon Emperor. Therefore, even after 3 months, Chu Feng didn't break through. However, his realm was more stable and his strength was more powerful. But they had never imagined that Chu Feng would actually break through without a sound. Chu Feng's breakthrough was absolutely great news for them. Because Chu Feng had broken through to the Demon Venerable realm, it would be easier to fight against the disciples of First Academy. As long as Chu Feng defeated the disciples of First Academy, the shame of Tianyuan Academy would be swept away. My lord, Chu Feng is so powerful. Can our disciples do it? The family heads saw Chu Feng's powerful strength and couldn't help but ask Yi Hao worriedly. There should be no problem. Yi Hao wasn't too surprised by Chu Feng's strength. Although he didn't use the system to check Chu Feng's realm, he had already guessed it. After all, the system had reminded him that there were disciples at the peak of Demon Emperor in Tianyuan Academy. He was already prepared for Chu Feng to break through to the Demon Venerable realm. Therefore, he expected Chu Feng to have the strength of a Demon Venerable. But he didn't have to worry at all, because he was also full of confidence in his disciples. Because in the magical beast forest, Yi Hao had asked his disciples to join forces and kill a second-level demon, Venerable Realm Demonic Beast, to train them. It should be known that a second-level demon, Venerable Realm Demonic Beast, was definitely more powerful than a first-level demon, Venerable Martial Artist, even if the martial artist had martial techniques. Although the family heads heard Yi Hao's words, they still looked at the arena with worry. After all, they were a bunch of demon emperors, and their strengths were uneven. Dealing with a first-order demon venerable was something none of them dared to imagine. At this moment, the two sides were already fighting in the arena. "You bastard, I'll kill you first." Chu Feng looked at the crowd that was rushing towards him without the slightest trace of fear on his face. The long sword in Chu Feng's hand flashed out a sword flower. With a series of rumbling sounds, it pierced towards Wang Kai. "Wang Kai, retreat." Seeing Chu Feng's actions, a disciple spoke. As soon as the disciple finished speaking, Wang Kai quickly retreated to the side. "Trying to escape? Do you think you can escape?" Seeing Wang Kai retreat, Chu Feng sneered. His long sword was aimed at Wang Kai's neck. But at this moment, two disciples attacked from the left and right, attacking Chu Feng from two different directions. The weapons of the two disciples were also aimed at Chu Feng's vital parts. Chu Feng's heart trembled because if he continued to attack Wang Kai, even if he managed to kill Wang Kai, he would most likely lose his life in the Yellow Springs. Moreover, he didn't dare to take such a gamble because, in his opinion, no one's life in the arena was more valuable than his own. A mere Wang Kai was not worth risking his life for. In order to avoid the attacks from both sides, Chu Feng had to give up on attacking Wang Kai and retreat immediately. Whoosh! However, the moment he retreated, the sound of a weapon piercing through the air came from behind him. "You're courting death." Chu Feng heard the sound behind him and immediately shouted angrily. Sword swing of 1,000 years. Chu Feng was in a dangerous situation and had no choice but to use a martial technique. Suddenly, a majestic force surged out from Chu Feng's long sword and pressed in all directions. That majestic force would probably make any disciple feel uncomfortable if it hit them. I didn't expect Chu Feng to be forced to use a martial technique so quickly. Seeing Chu Feng use a martial technique, many people were surprised. The disciples besieging Chu Feng seemed to have expected that Chu Feng would use a martial technique. When Chu Feng used his martial technique, all the disciples had already retreated. Chu Feng naturally turned the situation around, but at the same time, the martial technique that Chu Feng had used up a lot of energy to use didn't have the slightest effect. It was wasted just like that. "Bastards, don't run if you have the ability." Chu Feng couldn't help but feel angry when he saw that his martial technique didn't hurt a single person. Cloud swallowing sword, triple green sword, mountain breaking chop. And at this moment, all of the disciples, without prior agreement, actually all used their own martial arts to attack Chu Feng. The onlookers looked at the 20 disciples. All of them used different martial techniques at the same time. Their martial techniques were gorgeous and colorful, and their combined power was astonishing. When everyone saw this scene, they were also taken aback, because the 20 disciples used their martial techniques almost at the same time. There was no distinction between who used them first and who used them first. Some were strong, some were weak. They intertwined together and bombarded Chu Feng. The onlookers couldn't help but break out in cold sweat for Chu Feng, because such a joint attack was really shocking. If Chu Feng didn't deal with it well, he would be in danger. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but marvel at the godlike cooperation between the disciples of the First Academy. It was impeccable. If the disciples of the First Academy didn't have such tacit cooperation, it would be impossible to force Chu Feng, a level 1 demon venerable, into such a state. Most of the disciples of the First Academy would have been killed by Chu Feng. But at this moment, there wasn't a single casualty in the First Academy. Instead, they had forced Chu Feng into a dangerous situation twice. How can their cooperation be so good? Even the elders of the Tianyuan Academy couldn't help but be shocked at the scene in front of them. How did the Lord train these disciples to be so valiant? Many of the families were completely shocked at this moment. This was because they were worried that it would be difficult for these disciples to cooperate because of their different levels of strength. But at this moment, these disciples with different levels of strength cooperated seamlessly. At this moment, Chu Feng didn't expect that he, a demon venerable, would be forced into such a state by a group of trash that looked down on the Demon Emperor. Even though Chu Feng looked down on the disciples of the First Academy in the beginning, he couldn't help but be cautious at this moment. After all, if he wasn't careful, he might fail miserably. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.